Good evening. I'd like to welcome all of you to the City Council special meeting and work session of Tuesday, February 13th. Call the meeting to order. And first, we're going to amend the agenda. Before public comment tonight, we will have an added agenda item of public comment rules.
Madam Mayor, I'd like to amend the standards of public comment to include the following. Can I read that? Right. Public comment during city council meetings is not an absolute right. Rather, the city council permits public comment only for the limited purposes of hearing from the public about matters directly related to the business of the city that is within the council's jurisdiction. The public comment period is a limited public forum, and comments are therefore appropriately limited to matters of concern, official action, or deliberation which are or may come before city council. The city council is not creating an opportunity for and will not accept public comment on matters that fall outside the scope of the council's jurisdiction, such as employment issues related to employees and officers who are not appointed or supervised by council. During public hearings, all public comment must relate to the specific matter under the discussion. All public comments must be addressed to the city council as a body. Public comment must not unduly interfere with the city council's ability to conduct business or otherwise disrupt city council meetings. Comments that substantially interrupt, delay, or disturb the peace and good order of the proceedings of the city council are not permitted. Examples of such type of comments include shouting, use of profanity or vulgarity, or speaking outside of allotted time. In addition, public comment may not be used for belligerent or abusive behavior, including true threats, fighting words, or incitements to imminent lawless action. Abusive and harassing comments that could lead to the creation of a hostile work environment for city employees required to attend city council meetings likewise unduly interferes with the council's ability to conduct its business and are therefore prohibited. The city council requests that all public comment is provided in a manner that is respectful to those in attendance at the meeting.
Second motion.
Okay, so it's been moved that we adopt those public comment rules. Any further discussion? Okay, would you call the roll, please?
Councilor Ogilvie,
Yes.
Council President McCarthy,
Yes.
Councilor Hayes.
Yes.
Councilor Kerr.
Yes.
Mayor Knopf.
Yes. Okay, and so we still do need to approve the revised agenda.
So moved.
Second. All in favor?
Yes.
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 Okay, thank you. Okay, so now we will open it up to public comment. We'll go with the audience first, and just remember that we're following our new policies and rules, and be kind and respectful and under 3 minutes, please. Is there anyone that would like to make public comment? Andrew?
Andrew Towner, PO Box 664. I appreciate what the public comment amendment is supposed to do. I don't know if I heard the word hate speech in there. I would hope that would be included. Okay, so bear with me. And this agenda tonight is a monster. It's gonna be hard to keep it to 3 minutes because this agenda is just too much. There are numerous topics on here that could be a whole meeting. Probably, it didn't always used to be like this. Maybe we can find something needs to be streamlined. There's too many meetings and they're too long. But anyway, I wanted to speak on two things, and they don't come up. They probably won't come up for now, 2+ hours. And it's easy to feel like what I say is going to be forgotten. I have to go, but I'm going to try to come back for the Research Advisory Committee on NACUS, which I was a part of. I just want to say quickly, if I'm not able to make it back, I abstained in the recommendations. If I had to do it over again, I would vote no. I was deeply concerned about competition with the History Center and other local organizations and businesses. And I think I was also disappointed that we never talked about, even though it was brought up and asked many times, about what we would not allow at the facility, such as the dreaded weddings and so on. And that was never taken up by the group. So that's another reason that I would vote no. I wimped out, I abstained. That's what happened. Okay, now. Short-term rental discussion is item 8 on the menu, and that's what I really came to talk about. The 2019 Clatsop County Housing Study noted that vacation rentals exacerbate our housing shortage. I'm gonna skip over some parts because I just don't have the time. As I've written to you, I want to say, you know, in front of everyone, I believe that STRs subsidize the cost of having a second home. These allowances make taking that home off the residential market cheaper. Our STR policy encourages vacancy and discourages full-time occupied homes. This is one of the reasons I hope you will not stop at a cap on the number of STRs, but begin to sunset them all. It's time to prioritize community. And I believe STRs have no place in ours. They are businesses run in residential zones. They detract from our neighborhoods. People come and go, park, drive awkwardly, leave trash, and treat the vibe of our neighborhoods, our homes, like a hotel. You can say love it like a local as much as you want, but it doesn't feel like that's what's happening at STRs. I don't want to live in it. But my opposition to STRs is indeed as much moral as it is economic. It's disheartening for residents struggling for housing to see neighborhoods get pimped out and then toggle back and forth from too busy to empty, because it's just not a home. In terms of restrictions, many cities around the region are doing better than can be. Inside of Manzanita have instituted geographical controls. Deerheart only allows new permits in R3 zones. Astoria also barely allows them, even in commercial zones. But it's bigger than the coast. New York City just outlawed all STRs across the board. They're all gone. And why? Because what was the social utility? It's hard to say. Proponents of STRs, those who are likely subsidizing their mortgage on while they live somewhere else, will tell you that people are not going to rent long term. If that's true, that's fine. Let's not incentivize them and give them a paycheck for doing that.
Okay, Andrew, wrap it up, please.
Working on it. We got too long of an agenda.
Longer.
So one of the big draws of STRs is they come with the kitchen. So people will say like, oh, you'll be hurting tourism, hurting restaurants. People come to STRs and cook. They don't go out. If people, we're becoming more and more reliant on tourism tax lodging dollars. We don't want to go too far in that devil's bargain by, oh, well, now we need the short-term rental money. Maybe some people that stay in short-term rentals would stay in hotels instead. And finally, I'm really wrapped up. This is last little bit. People that run STRs will say, well, what about the jobs? What about the jobs lost if we stop doing STRs? If STRs stopped tomorrow and all those people would get jobs in the service industry immediately, our hotels and restaurants would still be understaffed. That's fear mongering. It's not true. So please, for these reasons, economic and moral, please begin the path to sunsetting all STRs in Cannon Beach. They present no social utility, but rather degrade from our neighborhoods and community.
Thank you. Next. Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Richard Costa, PO Box 656. We had last time on the same issue, and again, I am in direct opposition to the previous speaker. If you limit SDRs, you're artificially limiting the supply of available housing, and that's why we don't have. People can't don't have any place to live. When my grandparents were alive and they had been dead for a while, you used to be able to, there were no restrictions. You could rent it out whenever you wanted. They'd have friends come out and use the place. And then I don't know when exactly those short-term rental protocols went into effect, but it basically just cut off all of their rentals. They didn't, because it required a minimum amount, there's accounting procedures, all of that stuff. So they just stopped renting the place and it just sat unused. And that's what restricting short-term rentals does. The only person that helps is the hotels. And I don't understand why we would help the hotels. I can understand it if you're trying to turn this place into a retirement community. But if you want a diverse workforce where people have a place to live, I think you absolutely need the short-term rentals. It reduces the cost of living for everybody. And it doesn't drive up the rents. And so, yeah, I am directly opposed to what that guy said. And it was up to me, I would remove your short-term rental restrictions. So.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, we'll go to Zoom. If there's anyone on Zoom that would like to make public comment, please raise your hand. Okay, thank you. So that'll close our public comment section and first on the agenda, we have introduction of new city staff. Bruce?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Actually, we have two of our new staff here tonight. And you don't have to come up and give a speech or anything.
Wait a minute.
I'm sorry. Be prepared to give a speech. Okay.
No speech.
Oh, they
A long enough agenda.
never want to hear me talk that much, but they do want to hear the new folks. The first one is Tessa Fund, and she is in our community development department. You can stand up.
There you go.
That's a compromise. Doing a great job. And also Sherry Scotland, who's in public works. And we're very glad to have both of them on board and they're doing a great job for us. So thank you, folks.
So welcome to the city. Welcome. And I believe we still have one more new staff.
Yeah, but he wasn't able to make it tonight.
Okay, so next
Yes.
meeting.
Next meeting.
It'll be a long speech that will require him.
Yeah.
Right, that's
Yeah, but tell Barr that you had to give a really long speech. Yeah. That's our story and we'll stick to it.
right. Okay, thank you and welcome. Okay, so first on the agenda after those introductions is a public hearing. And this is a hearing for ZO 2303 CETA Incorporated applicant on behalf of the city of Cannon Beach request for a comprehensive plan amendment and zone change for tax lot 41006B000200. A partially developed property adjacent to the intersection of US 101 and Tolvana Main Line Road. The property is currently zoned industrial reserve IR, and the request is to change the zoning classification to institutional IN. Does anyone object to the jurisdiction of the city council to hear this application at this time? Does any counselor believe he or she has a personal bias to declare? Does any counselor believe he or she has a conflict of interest? Has any counselor had any ex parte contacts or made a site visit?
Site visit?
Site visits? Okay, is there any additional correspondence? Okay, so we'll request the staff report. Steve?
First, I'd just like to say that Tessa's gone now, but I'm the fortunate one to have her come into my department and she's working out excellent. So I just want to let her know I appreciate that she's working for community development. What we're taking a look tonight, Mayor, Council, is that the City of Cannon Beach Police Department One of the things we have to do is have to do a rezoning to the property because right now it's zoned institutional reserve, kind of a holding zone for properties, government institutional type uses. The city is proposing to change that institutional reserve to institutional. And that change of use would allow for the city and the police station to develop a new police station on the site, which is located adjacent to the intersection of US Highway 101 at Tolovana Mainline Road. The parcel was acquired by the city as part of the purchase of the larger Southwind site in 2013. After acquiring the property, the Southwind master plan was finalized in December of 2014, and the plan detailed current conditions and outlined potential development. The plan states that the city intends to use the site for critical and essential facilities and services because the property is largely of the reach of the largest predicted tsunami. The city has long considered the property for development of the new essential facilities above the tsunami inundation line. And the goal for the police station project is to develop a structure that will facilitate the department's ability to provide day-to-day services while being constructed to remain operational following a seismic or tsunami event. The proposed emergency operations center will be designed to function as an epicenter during all phases of resiliency efforts. The requested zone change will allow the development of the police station and emergency operations center to be constructed above the tsunami zone. And lastly, the proposed emergency operations center will function as an epicenter during those resiliency efforts. The requested zone change will allow the development of the police station, and the police and emergency operations located will provide Cannon Beach residents, businesses, and visitors with the best emergency services possible if a tragic event was to occur. During its January 17th, 2024 meeting, the Plan Commission recommended favorably for the proposed change, and the Plan Commission and staff are recommending favorably that the council also approve the zone change as requested. So I can answer any questions or provide some additional information.
Okay, we're going to call for public testimony. Their request will be reviewed against the criteria of the municipal code section 17.86.070.A amendments criteria. The pertinent criteria to be considered or noted in the staff reports. Testimony, arguments, and evidence must be directed toward those criteria or other criteria in the comprehensive plan or municipal code which the person testifying to the decision. Failure to raise an issue accompanied by statements or evidence sufficient to afford the decision maker and the parties an opportunity to respond to the issue precludes appeal based on that issue. Persons who testify shall first receive recognition from the mayor, state their full name and mailing address, and if a representative capacity, identify whom they represent. Is there a presentation by the applicant?
Yes, there will be a presentation by Leslie Jones. See you there.
Yep, hello. I'm Leslie Jones. I have very little to add this evening on this particular request. I'll have more later, but I would like to add that our decision to move the police station to the site in question this evening was based on our community outreach process over a series of events in which we determined to separate the city hall and the police stations to separate sites and placing the police station on an area that is outside of the tsunami inundation zone.
Okay. Are there presentations by proponents? Are there presentations by opponents? Is there a staff response?
No, the only other thing I forgot to mention was Oregon House Bill 2605, which became effective in 2022, requires newly constructed structures that are designed as essential facilities, which the police station is, to be outside of the inundation zone. Say that 3 times. Anyways, outside, and so that's another reason why we're making the request and the location.
Okay, does the applicant or
Thank you.
wish to make additional statements? Okay, so I'm going to close the public hearing and move to considerations.
No brainer.
Yep.
Yeah. So,
You're looking at me?
yeah, why don't you read
I
it?
move to approve the first reading of ordinance number 2401.
I second it.
Okay, I'm going to read it by title only. Ordinance 2401 ZO 2303. City of Cannon Beach requests for a comprehensive plan map adjustment and zone change for tax lot 41006B000200, a partially developed property adjacent to the intersection of US 101 and Tullavana Mainline Road from institutional IR to institutional IN. Any further discussion? Okay, roll call, please.
Counselor Kerr,
Yes.
Counselor Ogilvy,
Yes.
Council President McCarthy.
Yes.
Counselor Hayes.
Yes.
Mayor Knopf.
Yes.
This one, Lisa. I move to approve the second reading and adopt ordinance number 2401.
Second.
Okay,
we're
ordinance
done.
2401 ZO 2303, City of Cannon Beach request for a comprehensive plan map amendment and zone change for tax lot 41006B00200, partially developed property adjacent to the intersection of US 101 and Tullavana Mainline Road from institutional reserve IR to institutional IN. Any discussion? Okay, roll call, please.
Counselor Hayes,
Yes.
Counselor Kerr,
Yes.
Counselor Ogilvy,
Yes.
Council President McCarthy.
Yes.
Mayor Knopf.
Yes. So ordinance number 2401 has been adopted and will become effective 30 days from adoption. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Okay, next we have our action items. And the first item on the agenda is the lifeguard intergovernmental agreement for services. Bruce
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
and our distinguished fire.
At the December 12th work session, council requested a clarification on the lifeguard budget. The discrepancy was found to be based on the calculations that were based on a 7-day operation per week. After the questions were answered, staff received direction to work with Chief Reckman to develop an intergovernmental agreement for the lifeguard program. In the past, the lifeguard program has been considered a city function. This agreement created a shared approach with the city funding the majority of the cost and the district providing funding and taking responsibility for management of the program. In addition to funding, the city will turn over certain vehicles and equipment related to the lifeguard program from when it was a city function. The city will pay the district $265,000 per year for the district to manage the lifeguard program. At the end of each season, the district will provide a report on the cost of the program over the past year. If the personnel costs are less than the anticipated staffing for operating the program, which is $207,510, the district shall credit the difference to the city's contribution for the next season. Within the agreement, the fire department will indemnify and hold the city harmless for actions taken by the district in performing these services. In addition, the city will pay the district $50,000 to start the program for the 24-25 season. This is a one-time contribution. Questions? Yep.
Just,
Who has questions? Staff?
but just when you say a report, we provide a report, is that a full accounting?
Yes.
Okay.
It's to meet our expectations to be able to do the analysis of the cost.
Okay.
207,000.
There'll be kind of 2 reports. The first will be right out the first year will be the full financial, I think that you're referring to. But at the end of each season will be a full, as Jason has done in the past, report of the full program and how it went and where we're going with it.
I had a question about the agreement. It says the season is generally from Memorial Day through Labor Day, but I remember the conversation earlier about starting even earlier than Memorial Day because we've had some situations where we needed that.
Correct. You're right. Generally, the season has always been Memorial through Labor Day. And that's what the agreement talks about is that's when our staffing is guaranteed that we will have. But as we talked about, the goal of this is to be starting by the 1st April of starting to have that presence on the beach. At least one person on the beach and staffing up on those busy weekends. And then continuing through the end of the season and a little later in the season of the year when we have those nice days again. And so you're right. The generally there's the season, but then we have that extended.
Shouldn't it be,
Money going to go toward that?
Yes.
Well,
Yeah,
okay.
that's why the budget was created the way it was.
is there anywhere in the agreement where that's reflected, though?
I believe it is reflected in there where it talks about the general season, but it talks about the beginning of this, working before and working after.
Where is that?
I didn't see that.
Yeah,
That's why I asked the question.
Let me just check. I don't recall exactly where it would have been.
Yeah, I didn't see that in there. I saw the hours you're gonna work, but I didn't see these. Any discussion
Yeah, I haven't.
earlier than Memorial
seen it
Day.
either,
Okay.
but, this change was supposed to increase the season
Yes,
and it's supposed to increase the number of lifeguards on duty at any specific time,
correct. That's the goal of it, provided we can get the lifeguards.
as well as there's some capital
Yes.
expenditure, program things. Anything you can add to exactly what this is going to cover? And I don't know, is this something that, does the season need to be covered more in this agreement?
well, I think everything has to be memorialized in an agreement.
Section 5, under cost 5.1, maybe what they were thinking about where it covers
Oh,
outside of the season.
on the second page of the
Yeah.
agreement.
It reads, the city shall compensate the district for administering the lifeguard program year round, including but not limited to services provided during the season as described below.
Okay.
It doesn't really say what I'm hoping it to say.
Be nice if it was a little clearer.
Yeah, it says year round, but
It would be great if there was some specific dates in there.
It's real.
So it's kind of difficult to lay down an actual specific date because it all depends on the weather. Memorial Day to Labor Day, we know we're gonna have highest potential to have people out of school and good weather. When it comes to early staffing, there may be a Monday or Tuesday that's trending nice and we staff the beach. But then, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday is bad. And then maybe Saturday looks good and Sunday looks bad. If we put a date on, we will put people on the beach starting this date, then they're gonna be rained on, they're gonna be sitting in trucks, not doing much. I mean, we'll still make a presence on the beach. But Memorial Day to Labor Day is that guarantee you will have the lifeguards on the beach 10 hours a day, patrolling, doing their job. And then before season and after season is gonna be a lot of weather dependency.
I guess
So-
it's the phrasing of administering the lifeguard program that doesn't really get to what I'm saying. I mean, you might be able to add maybe a sentence that says include, or add even a phrase that says including the lifeguard services on the beach,
Weather permitting, or
weather permitting, or something like that, so that takes care of that particular program. Because administering the lifeguard program, that could be, repairing equipment. That doesn't necessarily mean services on the beach. And that's what I'm really concerned about.
Well, weather permitting, the district will provide lifeguard services outside of the parameters of the season as possible.
Because it's not just weather dependent, it depends on whether you have the staff.
People too, because a lot of our lifeguard, I mean, we'll have The goal is to have the head lifeguard and the lead lifeguards already staffed up by that point in time. It's just the other seasonal lifeguards, we rely a lot on teachers and students and people that are in school. And so they're not, we won't see them until June.
Right, we're talking about outside of that period, you know, it just, I just like to see, you know, it's like a contract. You want to have everything written out.
Yeah, are you really looking at year round or
Well,
really you're extending the season?
there is year-round stuff that needs to happen, and that's why we're hiring the one full-time. Because there is year-round stuff that needs to happen, and we're doing stuff right now, ramping up for it. There's equipment replaced, equipment repaired, and so yes, it is a year-round program in the fact of the administration of working at it.
So we're pointing more to the actual staffing on the beach and with that in mind, is there a certain time frame, more specific time frame that you were looking at?
We're looking more, and you correct me more, but like the lead lifeguards are April to October. That we'll have that.
Well,
Go.
that's kind of the language I'd like to see in here.
Yeah, that would be.
Too.
The Memorial Day to Labor Day, I'd kind of like to see that extension of that time, that April to, you know, staffing and weather allowing or something like that, so that you're not wedded to it, you know, April to October, but at least that there's some language in there that says we will be there.
Yeah, maybe as deemed necessary during those extended time periods it would be nice. It would be a little clearer in here.
So personnel and weather dependent staffing will begin April and last until October.
On the beach.
We had something on 2.3.
Well, section 2 is definitions. I would think it would belong under.
Okay.
Services to be provided.
But the sentence that you said would be,
Is this, I guess my question, not to over you, Bruce, but is this something we have to bring back to you? Because we need to get the lifeguards going. I mean, I guess that's my concern is I don't want to delay this because we need to get them hired.
I would think that if that's our only change, that we could amend the agreement with that, with sentence that you just put and put it as 3.8.
I'm
okay with that.
I mean, it's fine with me.
Want to repeat?
I don't care where we put it.
We took a minute ago.
Work on that now.
Okay.
So
That,
this is 3.8. Okay.
Can we start with the statement?
That's it.
I read.
Not yet.
write it out.
Maybe start with the statement that was 2.3 and then add something saying that, and for the month before, from April to October,
And then you say, you know,
writing is available.
Yeah.
That'd be acceptable?
Well, I thought you said 3.8, then you said 2.3, so I guess I'm.
No, the 2.3 makes a statement, this is the season. But then to say that the actual time of the contract and putting people on the beach will be from beginning of April to end of October?
mhm.
End of October,
Personnel and
He's writing his thoughts.
dependent.
right?
Personnel weather dependent, comma, the district will provide beach staffing beginning April and will last until October.
But if you have a permanent, a full-time employee, why is it personnel related? I mean, why can't we?
So we can patrol the beach, we can make a presence on the beach, but when it comes to a rescue, we will have to wait until additional personnel arrive before we can effect a rescue for our safety. So this would be if we have a head lifeguard and a lead lifeguard on the beach, because it's a good weather day, then they can actually not only patrol, but they can effect a rescue immediately.
But we should have, if they're full-time employees, will we have them on the beach?
It'd be just one full-time and then the lead lifeguards.
They can't do 7 days, 2 people could.
Yeah,
Mhm.
so someone can't patrol on every nice day in April, is what you're saying.
Unless they've got.
We'll do it.
But with just the 2 that are on full time, they wouldn't be able to cover it.
That's what we're trying to say is depending on weather. I mean,
No,
that's what's gonna be the big factor is the weather.
weather more than personnel.
Theoretically, yes.
But there is some personnel issues also because 7 days a week.
Are you saying like if we had a really sunny, hot week in April?
Mhm.
It's gonna be personnel dependent whether there's someone who even patrols.
If there's a week in April with those kind of conditions you're talking about, they would be able to cover probably 3 to 4 days. Or have one person on, but have to get assistance to be able to effect a rescue.
Right.
So that's in 3.8.
Yes.
I put it in 3.8. Yes, ma'am.
Good job.
Got that?
Is there any other?
I have questions.
Okay, yeah, first one.
Question related to section 6, specifically 6.3, but also a reference in 10.1. Do you see this agreement extending for multiple years? Section 10 mentions term of June 30 through June 30, 2027. And then there's other things talking about increase in expenses. So do you see this agreement as we're approving it extending multiple years? Or are we
Yes.
gonna be looking at every year there's labor increases?
When Bruce and I did this and we talked to Ashley and our board, the hope is that it's gonna take us 3 years to really get our arms around what is this program actually doing and what's the true cost. And so that's why it's basically there's a 3 year. At the end of the first year, we can have a little bit and we can come back, have a conversation. Hey, this is where it went. Okay, we're still building the program, so it's not gonna be total true. But by end of 3, we should have a good look at true, and now we can come back and say, okay, this is where it's going, this is what's done. This is where we need to adjust it, and we make those adjustments and move on. Or it's doing exactly what we all wanted and we renew and move on.
So we can expect this agreement to go through June 30, 2027.
Absolutely.
And that's when you might reassess the seasonal coverage and
Yep.
and other expenses. Thank you. Should I keep going?
Sure.
The agreement calls for the city to sign over all lifeguard vehicles and existing equipment. Do you have any idea what the value of that is?
Pretty much nothing. We went up and did evaluation of it. There's a pickup that we've been using for the last few years that's pretty worn out. We're gonna take a little bit, we're gonna take probably one of our vehicles and that's gonna be replace that pickup. We're gonna take some equipment off that and put them together. The side-by-side right now is out. We took it out and it's trying to be repaired right now. I don't know if we're gonna be able to repair it. I think both four-wheelers are probably gonna end up going away.
Okay.
There's not much value.
Yeah. And part of this agreement is the capital expenditure program.
Right.
You're actually replacing equipment as it's needed. You actually have a fund that will replace equipment.
And so last night in our board meeting, we actually went through that capital fund. We have a 20-year plan in capital fund and we started plugging in lifeguard equipment into that fund now. And how does that fit? So we already built it into our future.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions?
Where does the tower fit into that?
We'll end up taking the repairs on it. I mean, that it becomes our responsibility to take, to maintain that. They're,
I'd
repair it.
understand you'd like to make a new,
We would.
Yes.
but that's not possible right now.
Jason's been working on that. I'll leave that to him.
Yeah, end of last year, we reached out to Coasters Construction and they are definitely interested in the possibility of building a new tower. It's just a matter of cost and making it happen, but it needs to, it needs to happen. It was built in 1984 or 85, and we already did some pretty major structural repairs last year, and I'm not sure how much longer it has.
I'm in
Yeah.
complete agreement with you.
Yeah.
How part are you on cost and acquisition?
On the tower,
Yes.
I think when I talked to them, they were quoting about $50,000 for a new tower. With supplies and personnel costs and everything. So,
We're just gonna eat it in our capital reserve fund. I mean, that's part of what that money goes to, is to spread that out.
Okay.
So it's just gonna get ate in there.
I'm very supportive of the new tower and however you need to make that happen.
thank you. Yeah.
What action do we need tonight?
We'd like you to approve the contract for the agreement.
With the revision.
And do we have the revision?
Yes.
Hear it?
Yes, I would like to hear it.
We just,
Well,
Section 3.8. Personnel and weather dependent, the district will provide staffing beach beginning April and May and will last through October.
April, May, how about?
I think it's just
beginning April,
April and will last through October.
we're not beginning.
Am I in there? Oh, my bad.
We'll catch you.
Yeah.
We can fix that. Beginning April and will last through October. I see that.
April, May, June.
Tried to,
July.
I tried to cross out May, but I really couldn't tell the difference.
Chicken scratch.
Move to approve the lifeguard intergovernmental agreement for services with the noted changes. Section 3.8.
Second,
Okay, any further discussion? Okay, roll call, please.
Council President McCarthy.
yes.
Counselor Hayes.
yes.
Counselor Kerr. Yes. Counselor Ogilvy.
Yes.
Mayor Knopf.
Yes. Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, appreciate it.
See you on the beach.
Yes.
You'll see him.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so next, speaking of having lots of meetings, we have consideration of several meeting minutes. Good job getting all those done, Jen.
I have
Copy.
a couple of
Okay,
thoughts. And I don't know if any of this, if we need to amend minutes for this. But on minutes of January 9, I think it was a little misleading in talking about the funding of the police department and city hall. And the minutes say that Hayes added that it will lessen the general fund. And I just want to be clear that at least the point I was trying to make is that the funding department and city hall is not coming out of the general fund. It's reducing the amount of money that's going into the general fund reserve. So it kind of sounds like I was saying that we're taking money out of the general fund. And what we're doing is slowing the contributions to the general fund reserve. I think it's more important just for people to understand, not that it changes anything in the minutes.
well, I think you want to add the word fund.
It does
Right.
adding,
Right.
I mean, it is about the general fund reserve.
Yes.
Lessening the contribution to the general fund reserve is what we approved.
What page of January 9th is?
It's,
Oh, I can find it if you don't know right where it is, but I can,
sorry, I'm not there, but should I race you to it?
no, I can do a search and then find it and make the adjustments.
Okay, it seemed like it was early on. was like the first item when I'm talking about the funding. The other odd one that I noticed was on 131. And again, I don't know if this requires amending because it was not something that was an action item, but multiple times it refers to Dunning. Dunning said this, Dunning said that, and I believe that's all Marcy McAnally. I know Marcy Dunning, but I don't think she was involved in this.
Yeah, they're probably supposed to be back in the 25 to fix things.
Search and replace.
Yeah.
Okay, any other?
I have one on January 9th, page 2 of 4. Under specifics on funding the Cannon Beach Elementary project. It says 3 lines from the bottom of that section, Kerr replied of food tax. That's not it. I think what I said is I can't imagine any of us supporting a property tax to increase to pay for these projects or increasing the food tax. So that's page 2 of 4 on January 9th. Specifics on funding the Cannon Beach Elementary project. 3rd line from the bottom of that section.
Do you want me to add what you said or just want me to remove that portion?
Well, I remember the discussion and there were people who were concerned that we were going to raise the food tax or raise property taxes to pay for the elementary school. And I said, I can't imagine any of us supporting an increase in the property tax or the food tax to pay for those projects, for that project.
Got it.
Yeah, okay.
Thanks. Anything else?
To approve the minutes listed on the agenda with the changes discussed.
Second?
Okay. All in favor?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Okay, so now I'm going to close the special meeting and open the work session. And so the first item on the work session discussion is the utility rate study. Ron?
Evening, everyone. As you know, this is a continuation of your discussion about water utility rates, rate design. At the October work session, council directed FSC Group to generate various rate design options that distribute the rate increases more to customers with. These scenarios relate to increases that will need to be initiated in years 2025 to 2032. Council also asked FCS Group to consider some scenarios in which rate increases would affect consumption levels. In all these scenarios, the revenue generated each year is the same. Revenue levels are required to offset water infrastructure projects that council has already set in motion. So with that, I will turn this over to Doug Gabbard, who is on Zoom of FCS Group, to walk you through the rate design study that was included in your packets.
Thank you. Good evening, Doug.
No, just before, it would be easier for me anyway, if we could ask questions about each, about 0, about 1A, about 1B as they're presented, rather than having the whole thing and then going back to 0, 1A, 1B, 2A and 2B. Does that work for you?
Are you okay with that, Doug?
Oh, that's fine.
Okay,
Okay.
that's good.
I don't see Amanda Levine. Is she on as a panelist?
I will promote her here in just a minute.
Amanda? Hi. Okay. take
All
it away.
right. Well, thank you very much. It's good to be back with you guys and taking this journey into rate design scenarios. We're gonna geek out a little bit tonight on rate design. I mean, Amanda and I are going to geek out. We hope you'll join us and not just be annoyed by it. So let me give you kind of a rundown. You're going to be hearing mostly from Amanda tonight, but I got to get my digs in. So let's start by reviewing kind of an agenda of where we're going this evening. We're going to start by reviewing kind of the rate design study objectives and process. We'll move to the revenue requirement, and that will be just a review. And then we'll really get into the meat of our conversation, which is the rate design analysis and options that we have for you. And we'll show all of those to you at the very end together in a way that will facilitate comparisons. As we go through these, your rate schedule is very detailed, and we're going to show you the gory details, and it's going to be hard for you to keep all of these things in your head at the same time. And you don't have to, because we're going to show you a comparison at the end, and you'll be able to see a bunch of the relevant numbers side by side. So don't worry about that. So as a reminder, the key study objectives are to, and here we're focusing just on water, even though the larger engagement was about more than water. But here we're focusing on the water utility. One objective was to understand the revenue requirement of the city's water utility. We have done that. That is what the last presentation and the report that you have, that's what that's all about. All of the rate increases are described in that report and in that presentation. And now we're moving on to the second bullet, which is rate design. Rate design is how you craft a rate schedule to collect the needed revenue. And so this will remind us that the rate increases associated with the revenue requirement study are really just averages. They are overall percentages, and the percentage increases experienced by individual customers will depend on what we do with the rate design. So we have a number of scenarios. When we last talked in our last meeting, you gave us 2 mandates for scenarios that you wanted to see. And we, of course, being kind of overachievers, we want to make sure that we covered a couple of different flavors of each of those, just for the sake of thoroughness. What we want to emphasize, and I'm going to emphasize this a couple of different times, is that the path that you're currently on is something that we're going to call scenario 0, which is the status quo and where you are going based upon the revenue requirement. So scenario 0 is where you are right now, and also where you're currently headed with no changes in the rate design. Then we're going to talk to you about scenario 1. So remember, the first thing you asked us was, hey, let's give the 3/4 inch meters a break. And so we've done that. We've done that in a couple of different ways. We have lowered the base charge for the 3/4 inch meters in both flavors of scenario 1. In the first flavor, scenario 1A, we are allowing the usage charge to increase as it was supposed to under the revenue requirement overall change. But then in the second flavor of that scenario, we're gonna hold the usage charge unchanged at the 2023 level, to give you a couple different options about how you can implement that. The second scenario is all about your second request to us, which is, what if we shift more of the cost into the volumetric rate rather than relying as much on the base rate? So that's what scenario 2 is all about. And we have divided this into a couple of different sub-scenarios based upon the conversation that we had together last time. And the difference between the sub-scenarios is the subject of price elasticity. So this is a concept that's very well accepted in economics, that if you raise the price on something, you're going to get less consumption of it. Now, how much less is is a question that's open for debate. We have some research that shows us that gives us some ideas of how residential water in particular is affected by changes in price. And so we're going to use that as a base to show you what higher volumetric rates reflecting the impact of elasticity. We're going to show you what those rates look like. Now, if you have a situation in Cannon Beach where price elasticity doesn't really apply, then the rate increases don't have to be as dramatic, because we're assuming that no one is going to consume less water as it gets more expensive. And so you don't have to quite make it so expensive. And so we'll show you both of those scenarios, and we can talk about the implications of each. So for now, let's recap the revenue requirement. What's on this next slide is not any new information. You have already seen all of this. This is the current rate path we're on. Some very strong rate increases for several years in the 20% neighborhood, tapering off in fiscal 29 to 11%, and then finally after fiscal 29 getting into more inflationary increases. But this revenue requirement analysis forms the basis of all scenarios, and so what you're looking at right now is what we will call scenario 0. And when we show you the actual rates behind this, that's what these rates are the scenario 0, what you're currently on. But now we're going to get into the actual analysis. And one final word before I turn this over to Amanda, and this is the last time you'll hear me emphasize this, because you may be getting sick of it. But this is not the first time you have adjusted or considered adjusting your rate structure. The last time you adjusted your rate structure, it created a different level of revenue collection. And we just want to emphasize that what we're going to show you tonight are several different ways to earn the same amount of money. So none of don't judge any of these scenarios that we show you based upon how much money they will recover, because they all recover the same amount of money, which is why we got your detailed customer billing data, to make sure that we could dial it in and achieve that. So everything you see tonight will be revenue neutral, in the sense that in aggregate, it raises the same amount of revenue overall. It's just individual customer classes and certain behavior patterns will be winners and losers depending upon how the structure has changed. Are you ready to see the scenarios?
Yes, please.
Here we go.
All right, thank you, Doug. Hi, everyone. So as Doug laid out, as well as the agenda, we're going to be talking about 5 different scenarios. The first one being our status quo, scenario 0. And this keeps everything the same within the city. So all we're doing is simply raising the current rates by the recommended fiscal year 2023 rates. And again, each customer is going to be charged a base rate, as they usually are. Each customer is going to be charged a usage charge, which is based on that per 100 cubic feet of water. Each customer is going to have a 400 cubic feet allowance, as they are today. And this is, again, the current rate design and current schedule. So on the next slide, when we look at our rate schedule, you'll see that the $25.67 for the 3/4 meter, the residential meter, which we'll be referring to it as that from here on out, goes up by 23% to $31.57, and every other meter size does as well. You'll also notice that the volume charge goes up by this amount, and now we have a $7.90 charge per 100 cubic feet of water usage for any kind of customer. At the bottom of the screen, we have the water sample bills, and you're going to see this box on each one of the different water rate schedules for all of the different scenarios. And we're comparing 4 different kinds of customers. The first customer is the lowest meter size, 3/4 residential meter. and they are using the allowance of water usage. So they're either using less than 400 or at that 400 mark. The next customer is the same kind of customer, but is just using more water. So they're using 800 cubic feet of water within the allotted time. The next two examples are both larger meter size customers at 2 inches, one of them using the allowance and then one of them using more usage. So this can give you a comparison on how different kinds of customers are going to be charged based on what scenario we're looking at. I know that we wanted to talk about each one as we move forward. Were there any questions about scenario 0 before I move on?
Yes, so I just want to reiterate, so there is no incentive in this chart for somebody who has a 3/4 inch meter to use less than 400 cubic
Yeah.
feet, because if they use 100, 200, 300, or 400 in their home, they'll pay the same rate up to 400.
Yeah, that's true.
So they all pay the minimum, but the 3/4 inch meter isn't getting any deal by trying to conserve water.
That is correct.
Okay.
Scenario 0 is what we looked at originally
Right.
before we asked for more. Isn't that correct?
Yeah, this is what is happening now.
Okay, that's just applying the increases that you recommended in the beginning.
Yes.
Okay.
And before we go any farther, we already did an increase at a meeting. We've already voted on an increase
This year.
Correct.
for fiscal year. Well, it went into effect this January, right? January 1st. And I'm not sure if that's reflected on all these charts. Is it?
Yes. So the $31.57 is the reflection of what was recommended at the previous meeting, and that is what was adopted for the January 1st.
Right, but on the subsequent charts on here, you don't you don't reflect that. So
Are you talking about the next scenarios?
I'm talking about one
Oh,
A,
yeah,
one B.
so those,
yeah.
the meters are, the scenario is different, so we're dealing with that meter size in a different way, so they won't match up.
Correct, so they don't match up, so we would have to repeal that 3157.
I see what you're saying. So what you can think of this as like a status quo for fiscal year 2024. And then the next rate increase, you would just adopt what's in the column fiscal year 2025. So you
So
don't
you
have to like
just-
redo what's in 2024. You're just looking ahead to the next.
So you'd subtract is that what you're saying?
No, I'm just saying that if all we're doing is kind of rearranging the dollars in the different scenarios, it's all coming up with the same amount of money.
Right,
So as long as you adopt what we're projecting for fiscal year 2025, then it doesn't matter about the previous column.
okay,
So we're not changing.
all right,
Yeah,
I
you wouldn't have
just,
to go
I
back.
just would have liked, yeah.
Yeah, doesn't that change the calculation
Yeah.
as we look at scenario 1A, and
Yeah.
part of the formula is we didn't raise the 3/4? So doesn't that throw everything off as far as
Yeah.
revenue neutral?
So when we talk about
Yes,
revenue
exactly.
neutral, we're not necessarily saying like each class is going to recover the same amount of money. So because we're lowering one meter size, that means all the other meter sizes are going to have to increase. So there's a give and a take when you're looking at a revenue neutral schedule. So yeah, if we hold the 3/4 meter to $25.67, that means that the 1 inch meter, which you'll see later, is going to have to increase. So that's what's making up for the difference in revenue, I think you're thinking of.
I'm not sure I got.
Yeah, I don't either, because,
Scenario 1A,
right,
fiscal year 2024, you show no increase, whereas we've already increased it to 3157.
Right, that's just to get the rate that you would need to adopt for fiscal year 2025. So if you imagined going back and doing it the way that we suggest for scenario 1A, you would have adopted the holding pattern that you're seeing. That doesn't mean you need to retroactively go back. It just means that you need to adopt the new fiscal year 2025 rate.
so okay, So that would be lower than what it is.
Yeah, wouldn't it actually lower some of those numbers since we are charging more for fiscal year 2024?
Lower the overall dollars that you're coming up with, or lower?
Would lower the other rates. I'm sorry if I don't understand, but
I'm trying to think of a way to.
I see what you're saying.
I'm assuming the whole scenario is getting to that 1.6 million.
Right.
But when you throw fiscal year 2024 in at 2567, when we've already raised it to 3157.
Right. So the
Wouldn't that-
shift of the dollars is happening in fiscal year 2024 because that's the next year of the customer data. But then if you just look a year ahead, you're really just raising rate increases on what you've already kind of described there.
So you're saying the numbers are accurate despite fiscal year 2024 being not reality?
Yes.
Okay.
And
I have to take you at your word.
And furthermore, you can jump into one of the scenarios at any year. At any year, they will, you could spend 3 years in scenario 0, and then 3 years later decide you want to adopt one of the scenarios, and they will still be, they still, every scenario raises the correct amount of money for its year. And so it's probably, although you're not looking at it this way at the moment, you will be able to at the end. It's probably most helpful to look at the different scenarios in a single year, like 25, which would be the next increase.
That's not going to be an increase.
It's not going to be in,
You
so
reduction.
in 25 in scenario 1A, it isn't increased. It's 3080, which is less than what it is now.
Right, because that is the scenario that is the different scenario than what you're currently on.
Okay, so the rate would drop back down is what you're saying, to 3080 from 3157.
Yeah, so if it's
Okay.
held for 2024, even though it's not reality, we're then applying a 20% rate increase to that lower number. So yeah, the rate would drop.
Okay, that makes sense.
Is that because the other meter sizes are going up at a higher level than they are now? Is in
Yes.
those other scenarios?
Yeah, in those scenarios where we're holding the lowest meter size to its current rate, and we're also not really messing with the volume charge, the revenue has to be made up some way. So the only other option is to raise the 1-inch through 6-inch meters. So they will be increasing at.
And we're on 1A now, right? We're talking about.
Well, I'm still on the 0 slide, but we can go to the next one if we're ready to
Okay.
go to the next one.
Anybody have any other questions on status quo 0? Okay, let's go on to 1A.
Okay.
And then you're going to make it all clear to us.
Okay, so this scenario is the first time we're looking at any changes from what's happening today. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to, we say lower because there's no rate increase, but really we're just holding it at that 2023 rate. So they're going to be charged $25.67 just as they are today. So all other meters are going to be charged more than that 23% rate increase. Now for the usage, the 2023 charge was $6.42, and we will be increasing this charge for all customers to the $7.90. So that is kind of unaffected by any rate design changes. That's kind of a status quo piece as well. We're just holding that lowest meter size to its current rate, which means if we look at the next slide, that in 2025, what you'd be adopting is a rate increase of some kind, but lower than what you have today. because we're thinking of it as, okay, we're making these changes in 2024, but not really changing the rate schedule until we get to the next fiscal year. So you can also see that the meter sizes for the 1 inch have increased. So they were $78.95 in the previous scenario, and in this one, they're $108.50. And that change is rippling through these bigger meter sizes as well.
But this scenario also is not non-conservation type scenario.
So correct. So none of these are going to change the threshold of 400.
Right. And what I'm saying is that there's nothing, and I'm not just for the 3/4 inch or for anybody, for any of the size pipes. There's no incentive in this scenario to use less water.
That's correct. The thresholds are not changed because we were not asked to change them when we last got together.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think we were more looking at just charging for use, volumetric use more than the 400.
Right.
But we would be happy to do that for our next visit with you.
Well, wait, let's get through this first.
Yeah,
Few more slides.
I have a question about, in the comment, lower the base charge for residential 3/4 meters, increase usage charges.
Yes.
Nowhere are we really lowering the base charges, are we? We're just increasing it less?
Well, yeah, so lower the base charge as in we're not charging them 23% rate increase. So we're doing a 0% rate increase instead of a 23% rate increase.
And then on scenario 1, fiscal year 25 through 32, it shows percentages. But I mean, do those even apply to this?
Yeah, so if you look at fiscal year 2025 and beyond, those columns, the only thing that's changing is that percent increase. So 20% higher than 25.67 is 30.80. That's the only thing we're changing, is we're raising the fiscal year column by the percentages in up above that you see there. The fiscal year 2024 column is when we're making those kind of methodology, rate structure, rate design changes, where there's not going to be like an equal percentage change from year to year. So anything past fiscal year 2024, you can think of as, okay, we're taking 2024 and then adding 20% and then 20%.
Right.
Just to clarify, the percentages that you're seeing at the top of the table, those are the same percentages on every scenario, and they reflect the overall increase in revenue. They are not specific to the rates you see below.
And you're increasing the base rate for all pipes larger than 3/4 inch on this scenario.
Yes. Yep.
So the base, yeah, and then the volume is increasing by the percentage. Okay.
Right.
We're still increasing the 3/4 usage up to 400 by 20% over the next 4 fiscal years.
I'm not sure what the total percentage increase is over the next 4 fiscal years, but we're giving them a break within the next fiscal year because we're holding that rate increase for a year. And that's included in that 400, like their base charge is, inclusive of that 400 cubic feet.
Yeah,
So that way it is giving them a break
for a year.
So I'm going to throw in another clarification, and Amanda, please correct me if I'm saying anything that is not true for these figures. But rate design is typically a one-time adjustment, meaning that we make a change in a particular year, and then whatever the revenue requirement says you need for overall rate increases in future years, all rates will get that in subsequent years. But a change in rate design typically happens once in 1 year. Am I saying that accurately, Amanda, for what we're looking at here?
Yep, that's what we did here. And it's just, I get why it's confusing because the year that we're showing that change is a year that you've already adopted. But if you just think about that as when the structural change happens rather than the rates you're actually adopting, maybe that will help.
Can I get a clarification on what type of customers we're talking about when we have a meter size of 1, 1.5, 2, 3, and 6? Are we talking commercial customers for the most part?
Yeah, so most of the residential customers are that 3/4 meter, and then commercial falls. I think there were a few that were 1 inch. I don't have the data in front of me right now, but there was definitely commercial customers, everything above 3/4 inches.
Okay, because some of these increases are pretty, I mean, we're at 1A. Some of these increases are pretty high for a lot of the customers.
Yes, that is true.
I mean, $5,000 a month for in fiscal year 2032 for a 6-inch meter. That seems like an awful lot of money. But
So this is the reason for showing you this. Now be careful of going into the out years to make comparisons. Try to make apples to apples comparisons within the same years. But your observation about the higher meter size is absolutely correct. If most of your customer base is the 3/4 inch meters and we're trying to give them a break, then that break is going to fall pretty hard on the larger meter sizes.
In some cases, I mean, how many 6-inch do we have, Karen? Karen? How many 6-inch meters do we have? 3 or 4?
maybe half a dozen.
Yeah. Yeah, so the 6-inch is like,
Hotels,
the hotels, the big ones.
it's still a lot of money.
Yeah, no, it is, but I'm saying, but you have six, like, just 5 or 6 of those and they're picking up the difference.
Some of these increases are pretty high, even year to year to year. For businesses, for local businesses. I mean.
Yeah, well, you're gonna get that with several years of 20% increases.
I guess I'm still not understanding. I mean, we're not getting what Lisa is asking about the lowering the bills for people who have lower volumetric use than 400. But I thought the idea was to incentivize people to keep it within the 400 or less by keeping those rates the smaller increases.
Don't we get into that though in 2A and 2B? Isn't that?
We do.
Yeah.
That's more volume.
Yeah.
Okay,
And
maybe I need to wait, but it just,
Yeah.
in 1A, it's the same thing we've been looking at.
Yes.
yeah, and it seems so to me that 1A is just like forcing the problem down the road.
Well, it may be, but I think they're doing what we've asked them to do. And if we listen to the rest of their presentation, we'll be able to analyze the different scenarios.
What do you mean by forcing the problem down the road?
Well, because okay, never mind. Just down the road, the increases are
Oh,
gigantic. But that, and that's,
well, they compound.
Right.
certainly.
yeah, so okay, but I don't know if
Right.
there's any way to avoid that.
I guess we should let you move on.
Okay. Okay, so scenario 1B is a similar idea to the one we just looked at, except we're also adjusting those usage rates. So before we're saying, let's give the lowest meter size residential a break by lowering their fixed charge. So we're holding them at their fiscal year 2023 rates. And in this one, we're saying, let's do that in addition to holding their usage rate at the 2023 rate as well. So this means a couple things. One is that you're gonna have a split between residential usage charges and every other meter size. So you'll have two different kinds of usage charges. And another one is that because you're giving residential customers a bigger break in this way, you're gonna see more pressure on those the businesses that have the higher meter sizes.
Right, so this is really gonna hurt I mean, financially, it's gonna be very expensive for hotels, let's
Yes.
say. This one more than any of the others. Right.
So scenario 2B, I think, is going to be
To
the
do that
hardest
too?
for them, but
Okay.
I will look at the comparison at the end. But
Okay.
yes, this is going to be hard for the larger meter sizes that use more water because they're getting charged $7.90, while the residential class gets a break at that $6.42. In
Mhm.
addition to having their 3/4 meter held at the $25.67 as well.
Well, for the 1 year. It's still increasing. I mean,
Yes.
yeah.
So if
think
we look at
that's
those
what's-
examples, oh, go ahead.
I'm just saying, I think that's what's confusing to me verbally is when you say being held at, but it's only being held at that for 1 year.
Right.
Not, and then it starts increasing again. So, I mean, I think that it's the semantics thing. I think that makes it so confusing.
Yeah, I understand that. I can say it's lowered to $30.80. But sometimes that gets confusing too, if
Yeah.
we're thinking of
The
it that
year-
way.
And the year we're holding is fiscal year 2024, which we've already raised.
To 31.
Right.
Yeah, which is higher than what they've shown 2025.
So 1B lowers the base and the usage charges for 3/4 inch, lowers in quotes.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so those are the two that we looked at that really try to attack the lower base in our strategy to give them a break. And the next two are going to be focused on shifting where the revenue falls in the split between fixed and variable. So in these two scenarios, we're trying to shift revenue to the volumetric portion of the bill. This one I'm showing you now does not consider price elasticity. So as we increase any type of usage rate, we're assuming that that's not going to change any behavior in any customer. So with this scenario, we're still holding that base rate at 0%, or we're lowering it from what is adopted now. And we're doing the same strategy of raising those other meter sizes, this time in proportion with the 3/4 meter. So you're not going to see that disproportion of those larger meter sizes getting a bigger burden in that way. The burden that they're going to feel is on the usage side. So in fiscal year 2023, the charge for 100 cubic feet of usage is $6.42. And the new charge will be $10.06 for this fiscal year, which means in 2025, it will be higher. So the rate you would actually be adopting is $12.07 in that fiscal year 2025 column. The shifts we're making, though, are allocating much more volumetric revenue by upping that $6.42 past the $7.90 onto $10.06. So this.
Okay, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just saying, so this shows like the examples below, even though their meter size charge might be lower, they are spending more money in the volumetric portion of their bill.
Because you're shifting the cost to the volume rather than the base.
Right, right.
Okay. So do we know what the average usage is for a 3/4 inch pipe? How many cubic feet?
I have the information not right in front of me, but I can get that to you, definitely.
Because my recollection, I think this was asked before, was under 400, quite a bit.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, okay.
And so this would be based on the volume of water that is used now. All of this is, so we don't take into consideration an increase in volume during these next years. This is based on the volume that we know that is used throughout the city this year.
The 400 threshold.
Yeah.
Yes, so that is unchanged.
And the eight,
This one is more of an example of what a customer would pay if they were outside of that threshold.
Okay.
But it
So
also does
see
not
the
reflect using less water because of the volumetric.
So this is more of a conservation measure, this one. Because
Yes, both
Might be.
flavors of scenario 2 would be considered conservation rates because you are charging more for the actual usage of water.
right,
And in this flavor 2A, we're assuming that all customers basically on average continue to use the same amount of water even as they see their volumetric rates rise.
right.
Right? So the
Mhm.
next scenario is exactly the same, except now we are considering price elasticity, meaning if people see that the rates are higher for using water, they might use less. And if they use less, then we can't count on them for a certain amount of revenue, and we have to up the price to make up for that loss. So in the previous slide, we had $10.06 as our fiscal year 2024 usage rate. And if we consider price elasticity, that goes up to $11.70. So looking at the chart here, you can see the customers that use above that threshold are the ones affected by this the most because the threshold under 400 is included in that base meter.
Can you tell us about the formula that you use to consider what the decrease in usage might be?
Absolutely. So this is important because the question is, does any of this apply to you guys? So price elasticity in water has been studied pretty carefully for residential customers, and it's most of the data comes from residential customers because residential customers are a pretty homogeneous group. They have similar usage characteristics. You could study commercial, but commercial includes things like, restaurants and offices, which have drastically different, so it'd be very hard to study something like this. So most of what we know about price elasticity and water consumption comes from residential customers. And these are things that are studied in specific places at specific times. And the literature has gathered these studies together to come up with the magic number, the average of 0.51. And here's what that means. That where 0.51 is the number you choose, that means for every 1% increase in the volume cost, the volumetric rate of water, the consumption decreases by 0.51% or roughly 0.5%. So every percent increase in price leads to a 0.5% decrease in consumption. Now we've applied that to all customer types because we don't see any reason not to. It's been studied mostly in residential for the reasons I've told you, the homogeneity of the customer group. But we don't see any reason not to apply it to all kinds. But I don't think any one of these studies was ever conducted in Cannon Beach, Oregon. So there might be specific things going on there that may make price elasticity higher or lower that is not captured in that average. So so we're feeling our way along here, and we don't have exactly the number we want, but what's remodeled here is an elasticity of 0.51.
I would guess that's true. I don't think our commercial users, particularly hotels, have much choice. You
Exactly.
know, the toilets are gonna flush, the showers are gonna run.
No, there's things out of their control.
Yes. So there may be less price elasticity than the other scenario,
Right.
residential.
Mhm.
Should make 2A a little more accurate than 2B.
Right, I agree.
Yeah, that's why we wanted to give them both to you. And you know, it may be that the truth is somewhere in the middle, but if we were in the middle, we would just be guessing. And so we do have one documented good number based upon solid research. And that's what we're using. But the research is done, as I said, with residential customers mostly.
All right, well, that wraps up all of the scenario summaries. So this last slide here at the end is comparing customers to customer by scenario. So the first block, the first table at the top is that residential customer who uses within their threshold of the 400 cubic feet. So you can see that besides what you're doing today, scenarios 1A, 1B, 2A, 2B, it doesn't matter which one you go with. They're affected the same because they don't use any additional water outside of the threshold. Now, it's not until you get to a residential customer that uses above and beyond the threshold where you see the differences in scenarios 1A through 2B. Mostly that you see that the most expensive one is scenario 2B, where all of the usage is now weighted heavier than it previously was, and we're accounting for customer behavior changes and upping the price because of that. You can also see how a larger meter size in the last example at the bottom is going to be really affected by scenario 2B, because we're shifting that revenue in both the meter sizes and the usage, giving a break to the residential customer, not only at their 25, I think 67 rate, or yeah, and then also in the usage. So there are some differences to point out here. I think it sounds like you all are interested in that conservation usage portion, but laying them out like this, it's a little easier to see how the effects of these different scenarios are going to shape different customer bills, for example.
So to frame up just a little bit, when last we talked, there was great concern on the council for the resident who didn't use a lot of water. You know, the person who has a 3/4 inch meter and they're very careful with their water usage and they don't go over their threshold. There was great concern that we do everything we can to help them. And mission accomplished for that, because every scenario makes that person better off. So mission accomplished in that sense. So what we've done here tonight is try to shed some light on whose ox gets gored when we do that. Because if we assume that we earn the same amount of money overall, we have to, and we've helped one group, then by definition you've hurt somebody, and so we wanted to clarify who and how, and we hope that we've done that tonight.
Can I just ask you one question, though? If we increased the base rate of 3/4 inch customers by the rate of inflation over these years, rather than the numbers that you've plugged in, I'm just curious how much more burden that would place on the other users, the larger users, the larger pipe users.
So if you're talking about replacing multiple years of 20% increases with increases in the 3 to 5% range for a large portion of your customer base, there's a bunch of folks who are going to absolutely get hammered. And that's not, I don't know that that's a large group, but that will be significant.
Well,
And
also,
that makes sense, right?
well, also the people who use more than the base would get hammered, basically. In other words, anyone who used over 400 cubic feet were the ones who would get hammered, right?
Well, it could go that way if you decided to really throttle back rate increases over a multi-year period for the 3/4 inch folks, and on top of that, not increase the base charge of anybody else, but just increase the volumetric charge.
Right.
Yeah, you're that there's all kinds of things going on with that. If now the issue of price elasticity and whether it exists or not in Cannon Beach becomes more pressing. Your utility is taking on more risk because at this point you want people to conserve, but you also got to sell some water, man. Otherwise, your numbers don't work.
Okay. So you want us to say which of these scenarios we are most positive about?
Oh, so yeah, this is a very logical question. What you're basically asking is, where do we go from here? And so let me suggest you absolutely could. I mean, I'm sure staff would be very interested if you wanted to give some direction. And also, I would be remiss if I didn't point out that we've presented you with some specific scenarios here, but there's almost an infinite number of possibilities. I mean, as was pointed out earlier in our conversation, we haven't even touched the thresholds, and maybe that's something that you want to explore further. I don't know, but we have picked 4 alternatives in addition to the baseline here, and there's about 1 million we could have picked from. And we'd be so happy to do that, but we know that you can't, that you probably have to come to an answer, but we could do this forever.
Yeah.
It would make us very happy. I don't know, it would help you.
I just, from what I mean, I am partial to 2A just because I feel like 2A decouples the volume charge from the base rates, and it seems more conservation oriented than the others, including 0.
Yeah, the conservation point is definitely well taken. That is what the 2 flavors of scenario 2 are all about.
And I agree with Gary that I doubt very much if the larger pipes are going to reduce their water usage. I don't know if they can. I mean, they have this, they have hotel rooms. They can't, I mean, how would they do that? They can ask people not to turn their towels in, but I think they already do that, turning their towels in every day. So I would be surprised if there's much they can do to reduce their volume, except encourage more conservation within the rooms.
Exchange fixtures, but that's only gonna be a one-time.
Right.
We are agreeing an awful lot tonight.
It's really scary.
Nice.
Yeah, some of these scenarios, I just, first of all, all of this is hard to take. I mean, best case scenario for residential users or below 400 cubic feet is that over, the next, extended out to 2032, rates are gonna go up 2.5 times.
Yeah,
And under, what was I looking at? Even scenario 1A, we hold that at 2.5 times, but our bigger users are taking a hit 4 times, more than 4 times.
Yeah.
So I agree with you that 2A, we kind of do hold the line at 2.5 times for residential, but our bigger users are sharing the pain in about 2.67 times, extended out to 2032.
yeah. And who knows, what's going on, to be happening in 2032 or 2029 or, but I guess even though I would love to see what a chart looked like with just in the rate of inflation increase for the 3/4 inch pipes, it sounds to me like it would result in a really huge increase for the commercial pipes. That would be almost, maybe untenable. I don't know.
Probably, yes, because now what you're introducing is a multi-year kind of rate reset, which is not at all envisioned in any of the scenarios you're looking at here.
Right.
But to crank down a rate increase from 20% to 3%, let's say, over a multi-year period for a meter size that is a considerable portion of your customer base, that's going to have huge implications for the larger meter sizes.
Yeah, I understand that. I can't say that that's really fair.
Well, I could go with either 2A or 2B. I don't want to see the commercial customers being any more than than we have to have them do. It's just,
Seems the most equitable.
Yeah.
Between what the burden we're all facing.
Yeah.
And I would like to go with 2A because of the conservation aspect.
Right, I really like 2A. I mean, I like it the best. I don't like any of them. But I like 2A the most.
Yep. Brandon?
Yeah, I just have a question of staff.
Okay.
Is there something with 2A or 2B that there's not workable?
No? They're all workable, it's just programming.
Mm-hmm.
So do we want to recommend 2A,
To go in that direction?
go in
Yeah,
that direction?
yeah. I would.
Everybody okay with that?
Yep.
Okay. 2A it is. Thank you.
Do you have any further direction for Doug and Amanda to expand on 2A, or are you saying that 2A is you want to go with those rates? Because as I understand it, correct me if I'm wrong, Doug, but these rates need to be, or one of these scenarios, 2A, needs to be incorporated in the original rate study. And that rate study will need to be adopted. Because we haven't adopted that rate study yet.
So I don't want to mess with any of the practices of the city. So I'm gonna tread lightly here and and describe what I see working throughout Oregon. What needs to be adopted when you want to change rates is the rate schedule, and you typically do that by resolution. When you're ready to adjust rates, you pass a resolution adjusting the rates. For utility rates, a rate study is not a thing that is legally required as it would be for something like SDCs. So for SDCs, for example, you need a document called an SDC methodology that is available for the last 60 days of a 90-day notice period. And it has to be available for public inspection and all that good stuff. None of that applies to rates. You don't need a rate study. The judge of a good rate study is, does it help you? But there's no statutory requirement. But if the city has a practice of adopting rate studies, I have not accounted for that in my answer.
Okay, thanks. I'll work with Bruce on that. I think that was the original intent when we brought the first rate study, was an adoption, but I'm not sure whether that's precedent or that was something new, so.
So then the other option is each budget year.
Yeah.
Adopt.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's pretty much what we do, because it's based on the funds that we need at that time, based on projections.
Yeah, you might get 5 years into this and have to take another look if things, vary significantly, but this will give us direction for what to do for July 1.
Right.
Then.
And by the way, you could have it both ways, in the sense that you could pass a resolution with a multi-year rate schedule, but at any point while that's in effect, you could come and pass another resolution interrupting that with a completely different rate schedule for however many years you want. Anything that you can do with a resolution, you can undo with a resolution. But you can set it on autopilot so that if nothing happens and if nothing gets adopted, this is what's going to happen with the rates over time.
So with that, would council like to see a resolution for year by year, or do you want to have multiple years included?
My opinion is that I think we're going to have to do year by year, because we've got all these projects coming up, and we're going to need to know year by year how much is being brought in.
Yeah, we can certainly do that.
Especially since 2A does not have elasticity. I think that makes it more important that we
Do it each year.
by year.
Okay.
Do our own study on how it affects.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, please, please have staff monitor the consumption. And I would be very interested in how that goes. We'll make a case study out of you.
Right.
Okay.
Great.
Okay, so year by year, 2A.
Are we going, if we do year by year, I mean, we've looked at this study and then now we're basing it on volume. Do we need to have some kind of resolution that says that we're going to charge water rates based on volume usage or whatever, nomenclature they have for this particular way of charging?
I don't believe so. I think it's simply you're adopting, the resolution is just to adopt the rates.
Okay,
And that's what it has been historically.
but that doesn't guarantee necessarily that we will continue to charge according to the way this particular study is being done.
You'll make a decision. What you're doing is you're providing direction to staff and the consultant, but you'll make a decision on how you're going to do this every year. And it'll depend on how far along we are on projects, whether or not we were able to get grants instead of loans, what the loan conditions are. These, like that 20% projection is a guess all the way out. And hopefully we will beat that every year.
Or if commercial volume was to drop,
I'm just thinking
that
about,
would be another reason
Yeah, yeah,
to
but
change it.
as opposed to what we're doing now, which is not considering volume so much. We're kind of changing the way that we're looking at it by the volume aspect.
right, we can see what happens over, the next couple of years.
Decoupling volume from the base rate.
Well, I just want to make sure that that's what we're going to do, and we're not going to go
Well-
back to the way that we were doing it then.
On 2A, the 3/4 meter at double the minimum. Well, those 400 or less are paying 2.5 times the current rate in fiscal year 30 by fiscal year 2032. Those using twice the minimum are actually increasing by 3 times.
Right.
So
They're really,
there is some.
there is
correlation in there.
definitely, yeah, there's a reason to decrease your use. It's a 3/4 inch pipe.
And that's more likely, I mean, residential users may be more likely to reduce than
Right.
hotels.
We'll see. We'll see after a year how it shakes out.
Okay. Directions. Thank you, Doug.
Thank you,
It's our
Doug.
pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, Ron.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ron.
Thanks.
So before we go to our next topics, I would suggest a 5-minute break.
That'd be
Do
great.
you disagree with that?
No.
Okay, so 5 minutes. Okay, I'd like to call the meeting back to order and first on the next on the agenda is the City Hall Design Review.
Yes.
Bruce?
Yeah, and I would like to turn this over to Leslie Jones, who's on Zoom.
Welcome back.
Hello. So again, I'm Leslie Jones, project architect for the City Hall project. And this evening, we're taking a look at the updated version of our package of the City Hall design that we anticipate submitting to the Design Review Board. The primary addition we'll see this evening is the arborist report that was pending last time we spoke. That should be included in your packet for review. And there's some updates to the package based on that. We also have Jeff Gerhardt here to assist with any questions that you may have about that report. So the focus this evening will be on talking about the trees, and I'll go ahead and share my screen. Okay, again, I will go through much of this fairly quickly as you've seen a lot of this before. Our introductory slide here, though, I will point out, has been updated to more accurately reflect the existing and proposed trees on the site. What you see on the right-hand side, that is a shore pine, a large shore pine that we anticipate protecting based on that arborist report. You can see a little bit on the right. Also, there is a western red cedar that we are proposing keeping near our proposed plaza. The street trees are all shown as new street trees here. They are maple. And then in the background, there are a few large, both Sitka spruce and alders that are showing up. Our existing conditions report here also has been coordinated. I'll zoom in with the arborist report that you have. This shows in red those trees that we are proposing to remove. And I can go through them. Again, this is a high level review, and Jeff, if at any time you want to jump in and interrupt or correct me, feel free to do that. So on the western side of the building, there are a few trees located very near the existing building that will be removed. These two will be the proposed building footprint covers where those are now. There is one tree up here that interfered with accessibility. That one we will also be removing. This large one, it's a Sitka spruce, I believe, and we made the choice to remove the Sitka spruce in order to save and preserve. This is a Western red cedar here, the smaller of the two. The street trees I mentioned here, they're plums, and we are proposing to remove those and replace them with maples. In the parking lot area on the east of the building, there is several alder trees. Those are in the report that we're proposing to remove. And then along the southern border here, there are many existing trees. I know Jeff has looked at them and proposed specific trees in that area to remove to foster health and preservation of some of the others. So from that, I'll move on. These are pictures of the existing conditions, including some of those trees. The back side of the building. I don't know if there's anything you'd like to add about these street trees, Jeff, that are shown here. I know we're proposing removing them.
Hi, Jeff Gerhardt, certified arborist. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
I can hear you, Jeff.
Hi, Jeff.
All right. And nice to meet you, Leslie.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do notice that these non-native trees take quite a bit of abuse from the weather that they received as far as the north winds in the summer. It's kind of signs of drought stress. And then we had some recent ice storm damage, and they're not in great shape overall to begin with.
The other thing I notice in these pictures, you can see the shore pine, the large tree here that we're proposing to protect. Also, if questions come up, I believe Joyce is online, our landscape architect, to answer any questions as well.
I had a quick one about the variety of maples you're looking at on the street.
Yes, so when we get to that, here, I'll flip over to, I can go back to these things. So the street tree maples, it's a red maple, a Bohol red maple. And we do have a photograph of that in the fall, what that looks like.
Yeah, that'll probably need to change because that'll probably suffer similar to the existing trees. We'll need probably something more hardy, but something that won't block line of sight and small growing. And I can help come up with recommendations for those street trees.
Okay. So moving back, our site plan here. This plan for reference is only showing the existing trees to remain. It doesn't show any of our new proposed trees. I believe we are replacing a few more trees than we are proposing to remove. There's also some statistics on this slide. These also have not changed in terms of the size of the building, the percentage of landscape on the site, the percentage of building, and the percentage of parking area. These are a few site details. I believe we discussed last time the trash enclosure being of cedar, a detail of the bike rack we also looked at last time. And in terms of the plaza on the west, some of those areas, this is a detail of what that proposed bench might look like. And this is the bench with an integrated light source. The next slide we have here is the grading plan. It does show the ramps both near the entry, and there will be a couple ramps to get from the lower parking lot along Evergreen up to our plaza. Another thing to point out here is the underwater stormwater detention facilities. There are a couple of them on site. One in the parking and one on the west side that will be to treat stormwater before it discharges into the public system. So the landscape plan here, we were looking at some of those proposed trees with images of what those might look like for review. We did spend some time looking at the trees along the south property line here, and coordinating what those might be, it specifically in regard to the installation of solar panels on the south facing roof. So we do have two options here. These are images of them. One is a wax myrtle. This would be an evergreen tree so this is what we're currently showing. We chose the evergreen tree as a more appropriate option for screening from those residential properties. But we do have a proposed deciduous alternate of the vine maple. This plan here shows more detail in terms of the landscape plan. So we're looking at the number of trees to be planted. I believe this is, let's see, 26 in total. It also shows all the other species of shrubs and ground covers. This is a quick study we did of those two trees I mentioned, the wax myrtle and the vine maple, in terms of their anticipated size and how they work with the roof elevation. So what you're looking at here on the right is the elevation on the east side of the building at the staff entry, and the height of those trees as they compare to the angle of the sun at winter solstice and the angle of the sun at summer solstice. And so these would remain smaller to allow those solar panels to remain effective. From here, I believe that this is information you've also seen. This is the photometric analysis showing our site lighting. One thing I'd like to point out on this plan here, there are 3 streetlights that we are currently proposing replacing. So maintaining the existing position of them and providing just new fixtures. So there's one here, one in the lower parking lot down there, and a third one along Gower here. So those we're proposing, they're in the public right of way, but we would put new fixtures that match aesthetically the other pole mounted fixtures in the parking lot. Our floor plan here is what you've seen previously, as is the roof plan. This again shows the southern portion of roof in green that we feel would be most appropriate for potential solar panels. And the building elevations. So here you see concrete stem wall in response to those grading changes. You do see the reflection of the light fixtures we looked at last time. And these are our material boards, which again are what you saw last time, a mix of cedar shake and cedar horizontal siding, both with a natural finish in the front of the building. And along Gower and those recessed portions, switching to a vertical and horizontal cedar siding that stains darker. Signage, again, we spoke about last time. The signage is fairly simple. Each of these letters is 12 inches high. And the idea here is that the signage would be visible from Hemlock, so that you could see it without any additional monument sign or other signs. These are a couple images from various vantages. These are the two accessible parking lots along Gower. A view walking up Gower towards the building entrance and that staff entry. This one has not changed since last time. Our energy conservation measures. I'm happy to answer any questions, but I think we've gone over this. And finally, the survey here. And so with that, I will open it up to questions. Again, specifically about the trees or landscaping or anything else.
And this particular review has to do with the design review board. Before we submit, we want to make sure that you are comfortable with what the design review board is going to see.
Based on my review, I'm very comfortable with it. Well presented. And if I have a question, Leslie, maybe for you and Jeff, would be, is there any possibility of adding more tree canopy to the site? Or is it your opinion that the trees that you proposed to replace will pretty much maximize all of the space available?
So Presty, is Joyce available also as a panelist?
Yes, Joyce is here. I'll promote her here.
I will get to our landscape plan and then let Joyce speak to that question regarding tree canopy.
Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Thanks. I think there's a couple of spots where we could add a few trees. There were some of the alders that were removed in the lower east and south corner. There were two old existing alders in the corner, actually, right in that area near the trash enclosure. I mean, that was one opening. There's a lot of existing trees on the upper side of the retaining wall. We've pretty much filled the perimeters with a number of different trees. They're all held at, they're on average 15 feet apart. That's per the perimeter requirements. So I don't know that there's all that many more opportunities. Possibly, and I'm not sure where the utilities and whatnot fall, possibly as some additional street trees. We want to put them closer. I'm a little concerned about putting trees too close to the existing retaining wall between the parking lot and the city hall property. But Jeff, you might have some thoughts about that.
Yeah, they're there to back you up. They're on the east side.
Yeah.
They're there's a lot of trees that have already been established. There's a mix of hemlock and cypress. When some of these overstory alders that are kind of reaching maturity and are on their way out, and we're now going to remove, it's going to release more light and growing space for these trees that are already established. So we're going to gain canopy from those trees quite quickly because they're going to get more light and take off.
So Jeff, the one tree that you want to replace, the maple, what would you suggest goes there?
I don't have an answer right off.
Will we have one when they present it to design review? Okay.
I can definitely sleep on that one and come up with some ideas.
You had mentioned a cornice, I think, to somebody.
Well, that was what I thought one of the trees out in the parking lot island is that's going to be removed. And they're doing okay.
Was it the native cornice?
I don't believe so.
Okay.
Yeah, those maples on the street were a concern for me. Would like to see something, and so I'm glad Jeff is on that. Like to see something that thrives coastally and isn't as impacted by winds. On the south side of the building, with the option of wax myrtle or the vine maple. Wax myrtle is probably a better option just because it'll provide the year-round screening rather than being deciduous. But maybe I do love vine maples, and they could be on the north perhaps, and add some seasonal color and shed their leaves during the winter when you'd want the light. But I'll let Jeff take a look at that.
Yeah, I think that's good possibility, or at least maybe on the eastern side, we might need something a little hardier closer to the west. And then on the south side, we can maybe intersperse where we have, break up that monocrop a little and have, say, 3 wax myrtles and then a vine maple and just get a little diversity. So it's not just a straight hedge.
Yeah, I had the same thought.
That'd be nice.
Maybe every 3 and then 1 and then 3, or, something, a ratio that favors the wax myrtle, but get some diversity.
Your design review will want to see as many native trees as possible. Not just Pacific Northwest native, but certainly coastal thrivers.
I noticed there were street trees that were shore pines closer to the water. They seem to be thriving. It might be something to consider as well. Although I wouldn't want to put them behind where we want the solar panels to be located, because they could potentially become too tall.
I like shore pines too, and they can be managed in height pretty easily.
Mm-hmm.
Do we all feel like there's some consensus about the presentation?
Yeah,
I think we're really close. Yeah.
I'm real happy.
Yeah, I think when it goes to design review, we should have the tree matter figured out.
Yes. Now, do you want to see it before?
No, we're gonna trust it.
Good. Well,
Yeah.
We'll have everybody that you've been hearing from work on those.
Okay.
Great. Okay.
Any other questions or comments or anything? Really great. So thank you very much.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, folks. Leslie, thanks you for joining us.
Thank you.
When is that design review board meeting?
March, third week of March,
Yeah.
March 30th?
no, third week,
Third week, yes.
on Thursday, third Thursday.
March.
Submittal is due though, into this week.
Okay,
It'll be on March 21st.
okay, so thank you very much.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Dream about
Thank
trees,
you.
Jeff.
I'll dream them up. That's what I do.
Okay.
Good night.
Right. Okay, our next discussion item is a presentation of Cannon Beach Elementary Research Advisory Committee recommendations for the NACU site. Gary has been our chair and has done a great job. So to do the presentation too.
Okay. And mayor on that committee as well,
Yeah.
so
I'll chime in if needed.
chime in at any point.
I will.
So previously, on August 8th, the council accepted the recommendations of the advisory committee regarding the use and management of the proposed NACUS facility. And council accepted those recommendations on management and use and let the committee continue expanding by suggesting some policies, philosophies, strategies, and a mission for the facility. And it's those recommendations that we're presenting tonight. They were part of the packet, if you've looked at the packet. And I'd like to note, as Andrew noted earlier, that we had people on the committee who, we have people on the committee who were fully in support of the project, and we had some with reservations or specific concerns about the project. And personally, I feel like that allowed us to address some of those most critical issues to the community. You know, issues such as parking, competing with other facilities, nonprofits, and community use other than just creating a tourist activity. So I felt like, you know, we had those voices on our committee that kind of forced us to look at all of these and make recommendations on moving forward. The recommendations that we'll take a look at also stress building strong partnerships with local organizations. So those organizations related to history and culture, arts and ecology, which will be the primary areas of focus of the facility. As well as what we can expect from the facility as far as community recreational use and use as a community gathering space. So attached to the packet, attachment A is a draft mission statement for the NACUS facility. And I will point out that we call it the NACUS Heritage and Nature Center, which is a placeholder name at this point. But the mission that we agreed on for the facility was mission of the NACUS Heritage and Nature Center is to share the story of the cultural and historical site of the NACUS village, inspire understanding and stewardship of our coastal environment, and provide a gathering space for recreation and education, emphasizing local culture, ecology, and arts. In addition to that, we looked at what would be a 10-word or less mission, and so that's the secondary last sentence, sharing tribal and ecological history of the NACUS site. Attachment B gets into some of the use philosophy, and this is where we really wanted to address some of these issues of parking and competition with businesses and other nonprofits. So we've made some strong statements as far as philosophy that we are not going to increase high season traffic, particularly during peak times of day. So essentially, we're going to avoid high traffic events during the peak season. And especially daytimes, 10 AM to 4 PM. And so we're kind of looking at the high season and really avoiding having any event that's going to offset the necessary parking during those times. We looked a lot at not competing with other area nonprofits or community events. So later in the packet, you'll see we've looked at all of the major community events and how we can avoid scheduling over the top of any of those things, and partnering with other partners in town as far as presenting their events when appropriate, if they want to, using the facility at appropriate times. I mean, there's some things in here about never disrespecting the Clatsop Nehalem culture and beliefs. And some things that we do want to do, provide off-season, off-hour inclement weather opportunities for exercise, recreation, and entertainment for the community. So the gymnasium is going to be available to the public when the facility is open during the day as a interpretive center. We're hoping that there will be no charge for that recreational usage. Although if there are hosted sessions, there may be a charge to some of those things. All of the outdoor spaces and exhibits will be free and open to the public based on availability. And the classroom spaces will be made available to small venue group meetings. So local nonprofits who need a meeting space, space for educational opportunities is going to be available to them. And as it goes on to talk about the concepts behind the fee schedule, it would be available to those local groups at little to no charge. Larger events, there would be a charge for, and they would only be based on appropriate times and at a market rate, certainly not trying to compete with other spaces, but recognize the unique opportunities of this space and charge reasonable rates for that. Events using the kitchen would have additional rates. And so those are some of the general philosophy that we're bringing into this, which would be the recommendations. Then we made some recommendations on the educational content and strategy. So again, it needs to be emphasized that the primary use is an interpretive and educational facility open on a regular basis to attract, educate, and inspire visitors and residents. And this is both for the heritage site of the Nakus Village and for ecology programs. The programming and operations should prioritize, illuminate, and honor the sacred and evolving site of the Clatsop Nehalem Tribal Village, as well as surrounding natural ecology and the community culture of arts. And the park improvements will include an interpretive trail. So obviously, daylight hours, that interpretive trail will be something that will educate people throughout the year. That's where the native plant garden is planned, which, you know, we've talked about scaling back. And obviously all the rest of the improved public spaces outside will be part of educational opportunities, but also provide, you know, great public spaces for the community throughout the year as well. The classroom space for educational programs, presentations, and meetings with as much emphasis on arts, culture, history, and ecology as possible. And we've broken it down into history and culture, ecology, and the arts as the primary focus for the bulk of events that will be the NACUS presented events. So I don't know, I hope you've all read that and understand what we're looking at from the additional attachments on that master calendar. To make sure we're not competing with other events. Attachment E is where we presented the previous recommendations to council. So at this point, I see the advisory and research committee's role as complete. I think we've looked at the entire scope that's spelled out by the resolution that formed the committee. We've completed all of those recommendations about the mission, its use, its management, the policy, philosophy, and educational content and strategy. So we're looking for council's general approval of those recommendations tonight. And then also looking at moving forward. I should mention that and council is aware of this, but one of the committee's recommendations regarding management has a little snag. The discount rate bonding that will be secured for the construction will require the facility to initially be city operated. At least until a management contract can be more fully fleshed out and developed that will meet requirements for the discounted municipal bonding. I don't think that precludes the possibility that we will get to the committee's recommendation of the project being turned over to a nonprofit for management in the future. But initially, it looks like a city program is the way to make sure that we get the discounted rate on the bonding. I personally see an opportunity here to increase some public participation in the startup of the facility, as some community members have recommended. And so it's my suggestion that we look at forming, from here out, we look at forming an advisory committee that will give the committee, give the community a voice as we move forward with the project as it relates to the actual management of the project. So those are the recommendations and my suggestion as far as where we're going. So happy to hear some feedback or answer questions.
I have one.
Just to clarify, that advisory committee would be similar to like the farmer's market committee.
Okay.
Great.
So I just want, okay, this is just a minor thing, but on your calendar, on the final page, yeah, it just, you didn't include the Cannon Beach Arts Association Children's Summer Art Camp, which is kind of a big deal. Brings in people from all over the place. Well, you know, Portland, Seattle,
I thought it was on there.
I can't, maybe it is and I can't find
Thought it was too.
I've looked and looked.
This is just a sample anyway. It's not.
Right. I don't see it now either, but I know we talked about it.
Yeah, it's usually in July. It's a week long.
Yeah.
And I know they,
And that's, and I believe they hold that at the community church.
they do, and it's
Right now.
not a good space for it.
Yeah, so
Because-
in this facility, they might choose the
Oh.
facility if.
Because they're offering a yoga class for kids on animal yoga. And right next door, they're pounding on, you know, I was just really, it's not, the church is a tough place for it. And the other thing is from listening to what Andrew said tonight, when he talked about not discussing what you're not going to allow, tell me more about that.
I think some members of the committee wanted us to draw the line at some things, like weddings. He mentioned that specifically. I think maybe there was some committee feeling that, we shouldn't even allow perhaps an off-season corporate event, to use the facility for a conference. I don't think that was the view of the majority of the committee. I think of things like, the Oregon Coast Visitors Association, who does an annual tourism summit. I think it's an October event typically. And the space would kind of be perfect for that kind of thing. So I think that's what he was talking about. I think mainly it was a wedding issue. And a lot of people made a lot of noise about, this being a wedding venue. That's certainly, at the end of the list, if space is available, whether it's even available for something like that. So that's something that I more see, this, advisory or committee, weighing in on to move this to the next step of some of that kind of detail. And we have had some conversations, obviously, about free speech and what can be allowed and not allowed. So it's a tricky situation that we're gonna have to address as a council.
With like a wedding with a big dance in the gym, of course, that would preclude local people from using the gym, or, you know what I mean? I'm just not sure how those things interact. And he did mention being a competition with other arts groups, which I think you've addressed, and businesses. I'm curious about how it could be a competition with a business.
I think people have looked at it in some ways, that competing with other facilities in town. So,
Like hotels or something.
yeah, there's
that
a
have
couple of,
business- have
of,
meeting rooms.
where we might be competing for, the kind of ballroom space that, like, I think 2 of the hotels have. But I mean, again, that's so far down the list of the expected uses that becomes a little bit more of a detail that I think gets worked out.
Okay.
Plus, we're gonna work on not having those kinds of events during the busy season.
Oh, yeah, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, right.
even-
So if somebody's gonna wants a wedding in June,
Yeah, that's
not gonna.
a no.
Yeah.
Okay.
At least as far as our committee felt.
Right.
Yeah, so no.
Do you anticipate this committee being able to flesh out some type of shuttle program or at least an overall parking?
I hope that's some of the detail of what a citizen / business advisory committee would be able to do. One of my initial ideas was that, any event should have a parking plan. Obviously, not during peak season, peak hours, that's already off the table. But I think looking at requiring shuttles or parking plans.
I think that might be something that as long as somebody produced a, vetted parking plan, that, then it could at least be looked at on its merits.
I agree.
How it could be, to proceed with it.
I don't think we wanted to look at too many exceptions to the rule, but I could see if someone has their fully in place shuttle bus system where they're not using street parking, then that could be something that would be considered.
That's just my only concern because I didn't see it in the recommendations. But otherwise, I'm very happy with it. Like to move forward with all possible speed.
Any other thoughts, concerns? I think council will be making some decisions about where we go from here. So obviously it's going to come up on the agenda at some point, whether this, I guess, really my idea of trying to satisfy some of the community desire to have a little more input into some of these things, whether that's something that you all agree with. And how we get the ball rolling on it.
I think that's actually a great idea to have a citizen/business advisory committee.
It feels very
I
appropriate.
think it's
to me.
really good to have, buy-in and make the community feel like they're part of it.
When do you foresee that committee being organized?
I think it's something we should get going because, we're gonna want to hire a director prior to opening and be ready to move things. So, that committee should probably be there at least then in that advisory capacity and setting the more specific policies that we're talking about and getting those all in place before the doors are ready to open. It's a matter of looking at when is an appropriate to talk about these next steps on council agenda.
Another meeting.
How about next week?
We have 3 meetings.
Yeah. I'll add it to one of those agendas.
Are you guys wanting, like you said, a farmer's market type committee, correct? So we could work with Ashley and come up with an ordinance language for you guys to review.
That'd be great.
Establish the committee. And then bring it back to the March work session.
Yeah, right.
Okay.
Fabulous.
Thank you. And I would like to thank Gary for doing an excellent job chairing the committee.
Great job.
We started out.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Bottom and really worked through lots of things. For some interesting meetings.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think it was good that we addressed a lot of
Yeah.
those concerns.
Yeah, and thanks to the committee members also.
Yes.
Very
I'd
much.
like to call them out specifically. There was,
Yeah, there were a
Les
lot
in
of-
particular did a lot of work on
Yeah.
this.
And Betty.
Betty,
Yeah.
Carrie Ramey.
Yeah.
Sam and Andrew.
I do have one question in terms of hiring or making this a government or a city program. How do we go about doing that? Would you be hiring somebody to direct that? And how much input would the advisory committee have on that?
I don't think an advisory committee is hiring the staff.
Yeah.
It's a city
it'd be just-
program.
Ultimately a decision, but it's an advisory committee, so.
Right, yeah, but they don't
Talking about.
hire the farmers.
They wouldn't hire the person, but I'm just, as far as the type of person they want or the responsibilities they might have, they might make suggestions as to how this person might fulfill.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the kind of question I have. So, do you know, you don't, I'm sure you don't have a timetable right now as to.
No, I don't.
Yeah. Okay.
But we'll get one.
There will be one soon.
Yeah. Coming.
And a job description and everything else.
Right, yep. Okay, we're ready to move on?
Oh, sure.
Okay, one more just small discussion on short-term rental. Would you like to-
Yes, during the December retreat, the council requested a special work session. This one feels special. To discuss the short-term rentals. And following items were designated as priorities: capping the number of short-term rentals, penalties, raising fees, inactivity clause, not allowing an ADU primary residence to be used as a rental.
Okay, so want to discuss them in order?
Sure.
Okay,
Just with the last one, what I believe our intent was as a vacation rental.
Yes.
Yes. Yes,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
like a short-term rental.
short-term rental.
Right.
Thank you for that clarification.
Yep, good.
And that's just something we need to make sure lands in the code audit.
Right, yeah, which we will be watching closely. Well,
Well,
that, we could almost take that one off. So as long as we make sure
Yes.
that it happens in the code audit. That change. Okay, let's talk about capping.
everything that I have read, and I've read so many different studies, from different universities and from other agencies that have all recommended capping short-term rentals. Tonight, we even heard somebody suggest we just get rid of them. I don't think we're at that point, Ralph, because we already have a lot of people grandfathered in on that. And so I think that may be a discussion for years down the line, but right now, I just like to see us make a cap on short-term rentals. And I was thinking in the nature of 200. And I think that it's for a number of reasons. I have to say, it really resonates with me, what was said about social utility and how short-term rentals do not help a feeling of community, how they don't, they really deteriorate a sense of place in a community. And I just, to me, that's an essential thing. It is true that a lot of jurisdictions are outlawing them, or outlawing new ones. Getting rid of what you have is a whole different matter, and that involves, it's a much more complicated thing, but limiting and putting a cap is a very simple fix. It's interesting to me that the Clatsop County housing study, which was done in 2019 and which was so expensive, and one of their recommendations was, and one of the things that they said was they felt like the proliferation of short-term rentals really did affect the availability of long-term rentals and housing. And yet that doesn't seem to be something that the county themselves decided to follow, which I don't quite understand. But, I don't think I'll ever understand the county. So, I feel we've heard a lot from people who've written into us about wanting to see this happen. And we've heard from a lot of citizens that want to see this happen. People who have spoken out against it, primarily, I believe, are people who have short-term rentals. So, or want to have them. So I think that this is something we should definitely do, is cap the number of them.
And I agree with Lisa, and I think 200 historically is probably the number we want to cap at.
I pretty much agree with that too. The only place I want to push back on is, short-term rentals destroying community. Short-term rentals have been a part of this community longer than any of us have been here, and we all chose to live here. So I don't really see them as this detriment to community. I don't see them, I don't see, if we gave them all up, that all of a sudden our housing problems are going to be concerned, or that any of them would convert to long-term rentals. So I don't see it as any kind of housing solution, but to me, capping them means, most importantly, that when you come here to buy a home, and you ask, can I short-term rent this? The answer will be maybe. It's not going to be yes, which it is now, with certain restrictions. It's going to be, if we already have 200 of them, you can get on a waiting list.
Yeah, but Gary, I beg to differ with you on one point there. I know. Oh, good. I know
even though we mostly.
Yes, on everything else. In my neighborhood alone, I know of one homeowner who has built three separate homes in Cannon Beach. One they live in, and the other two are rented out as short-term rentals. Now, I know you're not supposed to have more than one short-term rental. You're not allowed to, but they do. So I don't know what the answer to that is. I don't know how you address it. I don't know, I don't know, maybe it's, even if it's in an LLC, you're supposed to be able to track down the owners of the LLC or the underlying human beings. And each one of those is, but it does happen.
Not
And,
to argue with
you know,
you,
and-
we shouldn't enforce our rules.
Right,
Yeah.
and people, I mean, the Airbnb and the other sites that do this, that do short-term rentals there, it's very difficult to track them. It's very difficult to keep, an eye on them and make sure that that's not what's happening. So I'm saying it does happen.
I think there are other issues to look at, like
Yeah.
the enforcement and the
Well,
penalties
yeah.
for violations. I think
Difficult to
that's all a
enforce.
separate issue, but,
Yeah,
and I hope we do look at that, but
200 seems fair. And I also, because I know where you live, Gary, and I know where I live. And I know that on my street, there are more short-term rentals than there are people living there permanently. And it does affect the neighborhood tremendously. It affects, you can't, if something is going wrong, it's really hard to person who owns the place. If you don't know your neighbors at all, you don't know their names, you don't know, I mean, it's difficult. And it is true that we have been a short-term rental place historically, but this town has changed now. Things have changed and people are getting short-term rentals and not even being in them, themselves hardly at all. So you don't even know your neighbor. And I think they do very much affect neighborhoods, living in a neighborhood that has a proliferation of them.
I think, it may be another topic, but we should look at limiting them in any the number of them in any geographic.
Residential streets I know suffer from that as well greatly. So
I don't,
those on the west side of Hemlock.
my neighborhood, I've got one across the street from me and I find them very responsive to if there's ever an issue. I think
That's the one that's owned by the conference center though, right? Are you talking about the hotel?
by Cola Creek Lodge.
Yeah,
Well,
well, that would be the conference center owned
I'm
naturally.
not talking about the Cola Creek Lodge, I'm talking about a house. that's,
Another house, okay.
And it's one grandfathered in for full-time rental. And I think our vacation rental management companies handle it well here.
Well, you're lucky. The North End typically doesn't have as many short-term rentals. They have some more permanent residents than, for example, Tolovana or the presidentials. True.
It's in their interest to make sure that there's not a problem.
Exactly.
And the local management is required. And I just think we've got so many things right about short-term rentals here. I don't want to throw that out. I think we've solved a lot of the issues so that other towns with short-term rental issues look at what we've done as an example of how you can control them. We did some good things with the 14-day rule, and I think we'll do a good thing by capping them.
Yeah.
But whether we need to look at enforcement and violators and absolutely.
And it helps to have a code enforcement officer.
Well, and he is on top of a lot of those, a lot of complaints about the STRs. We hear about it at Coffee with the Counselors constantly. And he's pretty much on top as much as.
So
we can be.
do we have a public meeting about capping them? Is that how it goes next or what do we do?
So, Steve can speak to this. This is in Title 17, and so that's in the zoning ordinance. So it requires a PAPA notice and goes through planning commission. It goes through the whole process.
Okay.
So it's not something that can be done just at the council level.
Okay.
And this is a work session, so we can't formally vote on.
No, but you can have a consensus of how you want to move forward.
Yeah. So everybody okay with
Was that the only thing we want to talk about?
No, but that's the first thing on the list.
Just trying to get off that
We're
one.
just trying to, yeah, move on.
I just wanted to ask, since I brought this up before, is that the 200 represents roughly 10% of our housing stock. And is that a number that you want to use to drive the cap? Or you just feel that 200 is the right number?
But I don't think we're gonna get a lot more housing stock. There's not a lot of places to.
Change too much.
Too much.
No, but we can affect the percentage of the short-term rentals. That's what we have the power to do.
Are you saying rather than a cap, just pick a cap number, we want to make it based on the percentage of?
I'm just saying that, you know, I'm trying to figure out where this 200 as a cap is coming from.
Oh, that's from what we have now.
Most of the time.
Yeah,
It's based on what we presently have.
which the last I saw, the staff report was 195.
Yeah, so
Right.
it's dropped by 5.
Right.
For today. But it might
It's
not.
slowly decreasing.
Well, no, we've had people come in who are building, well, I'm not gonna mention any names. There are people who are going to be having short-term rentals, more of them.
I'm just,
So,
I guess what I'm just trying to say is that I'm not really hearing why it is that the 200 is.
Well, I can tell you, Brandon, my feeling is that for many years, I think the highest I've ever seen is about 205. So 200 sounds just about right to me. It sounds like that's what the demand is, and that's where we should probably keep.
Sense of self-regulation.
Mhm.
Okay.
And I mean, it's something, maybe the situation will get worse and this is actually putting the brakes on it getting worse. I seem to recall, going back to late 90s now, that we had 98 of them. And so
That's where the original lifetime
yes,
came in, was the
Right, so-
98.
and essentially over 25 years, we've doubled. So it seems to me like 200, it just feels like a number that fits.
it does. It's a self-regulating number.
And hopefully we're not hurting anybody, which
It's not
I don't think.
punitive, right?
Well, some people will say just that yes, indeed, we are hurting them because it's a form of takings and, that's just part of that. I'm still not sure.
I wouldn't take away anybody with a
Not a form of
license, but
takings.
if by the time we get this passed and there's 205 of them, it doesn't go into effect until they drop off.
Right. Yeah, it is, I don't see it as a form of takings at all. That takings is being denied reasonable use of your land. And renting it out as a short-term rental is not considered part of a takings. If it
Perhaps
was-
I've missed.
if it was-
What I'm trying to articulate is that there will be a certain segment of people that view this as.
I'm sure there will be. There are people who are second homeowners who rent out their homes.
Or if somebody
Yeah.
wants to build and have an income property, I can think of, a nice duplex they could build and rent it out full time.
Or an
Right.
ADU.
Mhm.
I'm not gonna belabor that. Said what I needed to say.
Okay, we're ready to go on.
So when will this be on the,
Well, it has to go through the whole process, so.
yeah, but the first thing it has to
Take it
do
and
is we
run.
have to vote on it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if we look at it a code update, if you want to look at it something different, but you're right, we're gonna have to have a lot more discussion in terms of an actual amendment to the zoning ordinance. So there's gonna need to be some specifics. You guys are gonna have to spell out procedurally how the waiting list works, when things happen. I don't know that answer. And they're gonna come to me to ask that question. So I'm gonna need to know how to operate that. So not only some of the things you're talking about with the cap, But the other things that you'll probably also discuss probably would get tweaked as part of a zoning ordinance amendment. So it's going to be the same thing we're doing with the code audit, the wetlands, things like that. It's going to be an ordinance that gets presented to the plan commission. Plan commission will make a hearings process with the people in the community, recommendation from plan commission to council adoption, almost similar to what we did with the rezone this evening with the police station. I mean, obviously that's a rezone as far as property, but a zoning amendment change is fairly similar. So Jen was right with the notices to DLCD and different things like that. So my suggestion would be that something gets drafted, people take a look at it, make sure it's kind of in the right direction. And then at that point in time, procedurally, we move forward.
Do you know what would be very helpful, I think, is there's a lot of other communities that are doing this, and to look at some of the things, so we don't have to invent the wheel from scratch. Look at how some of the other coastal communities have gone about doing this.
Right.
See what it entails.
And I think we had provided the council a packet of several communities previously, based on, kind of the comments that you had made and requested information from staff to do just that. So I probably still have some information out there if anyone wants it, but I think at some point in time, we'll have to get something drafted that says what tweaks we're making and then just follow that procedure.
Okay.
Good, thank you. Okay, ready to move on. Penalties, I'm not quite sure.
I think that was,
At the chair.
I think that had to do with what happens when you violate the a short-term, in other words, what happens if you have two short-term rentals, or what happens if you not following the 14-day rule, or what, so, and I think that there was a feeling that maybe penalties were not working or not being enforced. I'm not sure.
Also, maybe shortening the time of taking licenses away, that you had to really be egregious in
that's
your
what it was.
violations before, for years.
yeah,
It could
it takes
stretch out for
forever.
years. And I think there's probably some strengthening there to make
Yeah,
sure that.
with you.
It takes like it takes over 3 years or so. I mean, it just
Yeah.
goes on forever. You can do all kinds of things and still get away with it. I mean, you might have to wait 30 days to rent out your place again, but then in the second offense, you've got maybe 60 days or something. It just goes on forever. We need to
I think those have to be tightened up.
tighten
That
that
rule is
up.
about parking and noise, and I just think that we need to make sure that they're enforced.
Bruce? Did
No,
you have your hand up? You want to say
I
something?
did, but I didn't mean it.
Oh.
But you what?
He thought better of it.
Oh,
I did, but I didn't mean it.
But, so would that, looking at penalties and things be that same process?
Yep, everything that you're going to be speaking of, that's going to tweak a rule or regulation would be incorporated. So that's why I'm saying it would be worthwhile to get a draft that tries to address many of these things. So everyone gets on the same page to say, yes, this makes sense. And then start with that process. But yeah, I think some of the discussion that you guys had was with the violations, and there's like a warning, and then there's a suspension, and then there's another suspension, and then there's a revocation. So I think there was some discussion in terms of the timing of people that continue to violate.
yeah, warning, revocation. That's how I feel like. One warning, because you can screw up, people make mistakes, and then after that, it's not a mistake.
Is there anybody that thinks the penalties are fair right now?
Is that
Fair penalties, the ones that are existing?
Well, the penalty is eventually revocation, but it takes forever to do
Yeah.
that. So
We
no,
need to
I don't think
tighten-
it is
We need to.
necessarily
tighten
fair,
this up.
Yeah.
at least fair to the community.
And the inactivity clause is a whole different thing. And that's kind of like Is that kind of like a vacancy tax? Is that what we're
Right.
talking about there? I'm just not sure.
That's second home, isn't that second home?
Yeah, that's more of a second home issue. And I'm still curious to hear, still don't know for a fact how that's progressing different places. I know that's been tried various places, like, well, Vancouver, BC has it for sure. I know that, but I've heard that a lot of other places are doing that too, and successfully. Then I've also heard that it's going through the courts.
I
So
thought that's
don't know.
what Chet had told us, is that Portland had a court case and something
Right.
else.
Yeah.
I don't think that's what inactivity clause is
No, that's
referring
not.
to.
What is it?
Inactivity clause, if we're capping vacation rentals, we don't necessarily want people who are, with, fees, and licenses low enough, just getting a fee and a license and not renting.
Oh, just sitting on it.
Right.
Right. In case they want to do it in the future or something like that.
Right.
Right.
So
I get what you're
The
saying.
idea is, since they're capped,
Yeah.
Lose.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I agree with that. That makes sense.
I've seen other communities with that inactivity clause, the language is in there. So it just feels like kind of goes hand in hand a little bit with the cap.
As our,
I guess, no, I don't think we have too much in that and, that's gonna be challenging as far as administrating, knowing who's doing this and that could require certain software updates, things like that, that may be capital expenses to do so.
Yeah, isn't it?
So and I'm not saying that as long as the council's aware of that, that might be something that we may have to dig into to be better at those types of activities.
Could that be part of the audit? They have to go through an audit every quarter, every year.
Yeah, it's an audit every year and it's partially like that, but you still got to have someone to figure out how often they're using it.
But if they're not generating any PLT, then they're.
Right. But the other aspect of that is if you don't want them and someone's inactive, what do you care?
Because they're holding a license.
Right.
It could go to somebody that.
It could go, but if we're concerned about short-term rentals and the fact that we may or may not want them and they're inactive.
what we should do is talk to those inactive people and say, why don't you rent this long term?
I'm not sure we would agree that as a council, I'm not sure we would agree that we don't want them. Certainly my approach would be to stay revenue neutral.
Okay.
On it.
Yeah, so things like that, those are all things that if we want to be better at it, may be costs involved in doing that.
We'll keep that in mind.
On the, we skipped over raising fees, just so you know, the raising fees is done through a resolution, so that is easy to change.
And where are we on the continuum of other predictions?
Well, we had that comparison a few
did.
meetings back, and are we at 600?
I think we're at 500.
And it seemed like the top one was at 850.
Somebody probably just raised theirs. Can't remember who.
I think Manzanita raised the rate. I'm not sure if Seaside did, but I think Manzanita
It
did.
may have been Manzanita.
We can take a look at that
Okay.
and get some numbers and some averages and different things like that.
Yeah, I know we have it.
Because like you just mentioned, Jen, that's just a resolution with fees. So that's something that can be done without the zoning ordinance amendments we talked about previously.
And I think we raised our fee for applying for a permit. I think we raised that 2 or 3 years ago. Something like that. The last time we raised it.
Was it a significant raise?
Yes, I think originally it was like $75.
Oh,
Yeah, no, at the time, and then it put us more in line with this.
Yeah.
Coastal communities.
At that time, I think Seaside was $450. We raised it ours to $5.
Say
And
that was 2 to 3.
I think it was about 3 years ago.
Okay.
Yeah. And I think since then, I think Seaside and Manzanita is their fees, their application permit fees, and maybe they're annual, maybe it's an annual, I think it's annual, 500.
And they also have a business license, right?
Yeah.
So we need more information to be able to talk about raising fees.
Right, we
Yep.
want to see where our rate schedule fits in with other communities.
And maybe what we could do is when we're taking a look at the actual zoning ordinance amendments, that information could be available at that time as well.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you.
Are there other things we want to look at with SDRs? I mean, we've talked about.
Not, will you remember the whole idea of not using have an AD. You can't rent out your main house as an STR.
Yeah, no, that one's the last item and I hope that's on our radar for
Yeah.
making sure
Code
that
audit.
loophole is closed and the code audit. I guess I'm more wondering about
Something
kind
we
of
don't have listed.
limit of geographic, the number of rentals in any specific geographic neighborhood.
Yeah, the problem with that is at this point, that would mean taking away people's licenses.
Right.
And much as I would like to see that happen, I don't know how that's a little different.
I think the argument is more the one Steve's making, and it would be, okay, now that's another level of how do you address it? But I don't think we take anything away.
Well, you'd have, if you were going to limit in them.
So it would be limit from this, everybody that's in is grandfathered in.
Right.
From here moving forward, if one of them goes away, the next,
Stays away,
right,
right.
next one can't be next door.
And then there's also, I know in Seaside, you have a certain, even in the law, when you have two SDRs, they have to have a certain radius around them and distance from the lot or the block behind them. I mean, there's.
Yeah, they've got some
Yeah, and
some formula for that.
and they have to go before the planning commission to get permission to even have an SDR. So that's an interesting idea too. I don't know if we want to go that far, but that's
Be the formula for preventing them.
I think our planning commission is going to be already with the code audit, they're going to be.
Yeah, the geographical area, the problem there is we don't want to take away from anybody
No,
that's already.
no,
So
definitely.
how would it work if somebody applies for a new license and they're on the waiting list and then it becomes available?
Have to be after a certain date,
Yeah,
probably,
yeah.
like a year or two down the line or something like that.
I'm just wondering if we don't tackle some of these small ones initially to try to get something done. And then during the code audit, have a little bit more of a discussion of these larger, because we're talking about a fairly significant change when we start talking about that. And I would feel a little bit more comfortable maybe having those discussions at that time. Not to say right or wrong, but I think that's a bigger issue and I'm not as familiar how we do the boundaries, who's involved in, making those decisions, how many are there now? That's I think a larger conversation.
This is interesting to me. I just downloaded some stuff from the city of or the town of Carmel, how they do it. And they have two different zones. One allows only monthly rentals in the whole zone. And the other one only allows weekly rentals. And they've carved out two different zones and that's how they do it.
You would want to live in the weekly
I
one.
wonder how the value of housing values, property values are affected by those particular.
What? Terrible.
I wonder how the property values are affected by those,
Carmel?
in those regulations. Well, Carmel, yeah, but I mean,
Neighboring
overall.
properties?
well, houses within that zone. If you
Oh.
have a zone, if you have a house in the zone for weeklies, are your property values any higher or lower than, say, your house in the zone where your monthlies are allowed? I mean, I'm just curious,
Yeah.
kind of.
It would be interesting to know that.
Can we do the cap on STRs? Can we go ahead and start working on that without having to go through the code audit?
That's up to you guys. The answer is yes, if you'd like.
Do what?
The cap on STR?
It really comes down to, it's almost in a way kind of the same discussion you had with wetlands ordinance and other different things. When do you want to get to it? Do you want it tomorrow, or, soon? Do you want it, because of the code audit, we still have a little ways to go before we really start getting into the meat of we're getting there, with the wetlands getting done, the reorgs, and we're going to start having those conversations, but that's going to take a little bit of time before that gets implemented.
I'd like to do the cap before the code audit, just because the code audit's gonna be such a long way down the
Yeah,
road.
it just seems like it's.
Yeah,
So there's just lots of work, I guess is what I'm saying, and you guys just have to let us know which things are important, and we'll try to get things done with the other projects and things like that are happening.
starting with the cap, I think.
I do see your hand up, but we have already had public comment.
So do I get to
We
comment at the
have,
end,
we have public comment at the beginning of every meeting.
but not at the end?
No. Thank you. And you can always write it. You can always write us. a letter.
Would this ever come to a vote?
It has to.
I mean, not for you, but for the general populace.
You don't want it to come to a vote. Or we might not have any.
What we're trying to do is make improvements, but not take away anybody's.
Well, you could just hike,
Thank you. Write us a letter. Thanks.
Okay, so Steve, I think that the cap is the direction to start with.
Yeah.
This stuff is more complicated, like the zoning areas where we would have, allow no more new ones or more new ones or whatever. That's
I was thinking, and you guys correct me if I'm wrong, the cap, tightening up the violations, and then at least getting the main home as, instead of the ADU, as not being available for a STR.
Right.
Those are probably some minor things that we could probably get on. And then maybe at some point in time, I don't know how best this would be, whether it be a work session item or something that could be presented to everyone and say, hey, yes, you're on the right track, move it on forward, something to that effect, that at least we know we're in the right area to move things forward and then start the hearings process to get adoption.
Yeah,
That sounds good.
sounds good.
sounds great.
I had a question. I thought I read somewhere this week that STRs are not allowed in commercial districts.
I believe that's correct.
That doesn't make any sense to me.
I think it's an interesting consideration, because oftentimes it would seem like in a commercial zone, it might have less impact on a neighborhood than ones in residential areas. So that might be something everyone wants to think about for the overall discussion, maybe at a later date on the code audit to think of those things, because if, for example, and I'm not saying this is right or wrong, I'm just talking, you have a commercial business and you have a second floor and something could be done there. Is that the worst location compared to a neighborhood? I don't know. Those are all things to think about.
Yeah, because I know of, at least I know of one STR. I don't think it is anymore, but it used to be right in the center of the town.
Sure.
And it was the second floor. It was one that George Vetter used
Yeah,
to have.
I was just
Department
gonna mention
George
that,
Vetter
one,
used to
but
have.
I think he had motel license or something.
I'm not familiar. I don't know the one we're speaking of, but it is something to consider. And I'm not saying that's right or wrong, but I've oftentimes thought to myself, I'm not exactly sure why, if there was a second floor, maybe not like in say, for example, you wouldn't necessarily want it on your first floor where all the people and the retail and the commercial are happening in the downtown. But if there was a second floor that was available and maybe someone wasn't using it commercially, that they could use it for that. I don't know if those are just things to consider.
Oh,
Yeah, Astoria just denied something that was.
Yeah.
First floor, I believe, or use in a downtown area. I think it was a retail spot, kind of street level.
Yeah.
But you can have you can have long-term rentals above.
Yeah, you can have long.
Yes.
And
It
that's,
just seems to me, I mean, we keep talking about it being a commercial enterprise in a residential neighborhood, then it doesn't make any sense not to be able to allow it in a commercial neighborhood. I mean, that's.
Can't argue that.
Perfect place for it.
Well, that will come up in the,
I don't, it should be maybe discussed or considered.
okay. Yeah, I think so too.
I have a feeling Marcy will bring it up.
I'm confused. I've heard two different things tonight about the cap. Was that on one track, I believe Jen mentioned that it requires a lot of notice, a lot of meetings. Is that what I heard?
Yes.
Okay, all right.
So that would be part of a zoning ordinance amendment. That, so we'd be adding that language to the zoning ordinance, and anytime we're doing an amendment to the zoning ordinance, that's when the DLCD notice and all the hearings before Plan Commission and Council has to occur. The fees we discussed could be done by resolution, so I don't know if that was maybe the difference. So that the fees, because that's in a separate document, we could do that by resolution and it wouldn't have to go through that same process. But any regulations, because short-term rentals are in the zoning ordinance, and if we're going to amend any sections, it has to go through that amendment process.
Okay.
Okay, anything else on STRs that anyone would like to discuss?
Right now?
Convene with you for 5 hours.
Lisa and I are gonna go talk about this later.
Yeah.
Well, and I think the important thing to think about, these are just some minor things that maybe get in, but as you continue to think about it or think of other things, there's going to be other opportunities to review it during the rest of the audit.
Yeah.
Yep.
So when should we have the,
You know, if you wouldn't mind, I'd like to maybe kind of just have an opportunity to get some thoughts together and draft, and then it will, I don't think I'm going to sit there and take my time, but it will take a little bit of time to maybe just get some language together. And then I don't know if it may be worthwhile after a while to have an opportunity to speak to Bill or someone to just make sure, hey, we good, you know, draft the ordinance and have it done that way.
what's a good time for you and what's a realistic time?
I would say, you know, at least I would say a couple weeks to a month to maybe get like some language together, and then possibly get it to you guys for kind of hey, this looks good. So I think it could be done in a reasonable amount of time.
Okay, that sounds great. Let's go with the longer period of time though, the month, not the 2 weeks. You got.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can have a month.
In that process, you mentioned that we need to talk about, you know, how do you go about doing this, putting the cap on and all that. Could you, if you have questions about things that we need to consider, would you write those down too?
Sure. And I can try to look at other things and how people are do that, but I'm not familiar with that. So that's going to be new, and I can research that. But you know, that's going to be important from us, you know, how we issue the license, when they come up, how do people get on a waiting list, how that's administered. So that's going to be new information for us too.
Yeah, those are the considerations we need to.
Yeah.
Yes.
So can we put this on the April work session, because your March work session is getting very full?
Okay.
Be fine, and I give you a little more.
Yeah.
So,
Good. Okay, great.
because February's a short month. Okay, anything else? We're ready for good of the order. We do have a trail cleaning party this Saturday from 10 till noon, and we're gonna meet at Second Street. And the sun will be shining.
Really?
You've been very.
No.
So far.
Anything else for good of the order? Thanks, Joe, for joining. You do?
Yeah, but
You do?
it's a quick one. Original discussion of the very original timing of my evaluation was to have it turned in today. 3 projects that are taking a lot of my time that didn't happen. I will get it to you on Friday.
When do we have the executive session? 27. Okay.
Okay,
Fine.
all right, thank you.
Yep.
So.
Anything else? Okay, thanks, everyone.